Oh, yeah.
That's crazy. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Mayor and City Council special meeting on water and sewer rates. Today is Wednesday, April 22nd, 2026. If you'd please stand with me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty.
Up next, public comment pertaining to agenda and non-agenda items. To comment on a specific agenda item after discussed by council, please sign up with the city clerk and you'll be asked to come forward at the appropriate time. Seeing that there's nobody in the audience, I will proceed forward. System study, it is on you guys. You guys can start whenever.
Okay, great. Before I get started, Dan, if you could just bring that screen up. Before I get started, just wanted to cover a couple of quick things. First, thanks for the opportunity to come and talk to you again. The last time I was here, I was just looking at my notes, was June of last year. So because of that, some of what I have here is you'll recognize, but I realize it's been a while and you're not spending every day moment thinking about water and sewer items. So I'll recover some things. Because of that, I'll go over kind of quickly. If there's anything that you want to spend a little more time on, a little more detail, just let me know. I'll slow down and go back to things, ask whatever questions. And I think it was a good idea to start with this first, just to give a little bit of a, kind of remind everybody what the water and sewer system contains, what are the struggles and challenges that it's dealing with, and the realities of running the utility in the context of the rest of your meeting. Good. After that, I'm available through the rest of the agenda if there's kind of questions that kind of sort that cite back to this, and let me know. I'm happy to provide input. All right, with that being said, I will move forward. So the water and sewer planning goals, we've been talking, when I say we, I mean Kevin and Jim and myself have been having these kind of long range water and sewer type planning discussions for a number of months, probably heightened because of the ongoing comprehensive plan and also because of a number of developments that have been in conversation over the last year or so. So goals that I see it for the water and sewer planning would be to provide a guide for your capital improvement plan, which I know is in discussion and we'll talk more about tonight. So that will help provide prioritization, cost estimates, schedule, put some bounds, and prioritize what's important, what's needed for the capital. I mentioned it already, but it's going to expand on the comprehensive planning that's underway. There's a water and sewer element to the comprehensive plan, but it does not go into the depth necessary to really plan details of specific projects that may be necessary for continued operation and growth of the system. Speaking of growth, this will provide a tool for development coordination to make sure that water and sewer components of potential growth are considered and that smart decisions are made for short-term and long-term growth so that you're not having to upgrade things multiple times and that you're planning for the long-term picture of what the city will be. And finally, to provide some water allocation policy and procedures around water allocation. That's what I see as the planning goals. Again, these are kind of where it gets into the slides that you've seen before, but just a real quick history of the timeline. The wastewater treatment plant, original plant was built in the 50s. The biological nutrient removal plant, BNR plant, was built in 2000, and then that was upgraded in the 2010s to ENR that's enhanced nutrient removal limits through the biomag process. There were, that finished construction around 2016, and there were compliance issues soon thereafter. So there was a period of 2020 to 2023 where we were working with plant staff and other professionals to get the plant up to compliance and running as it should. And I have some more detail about that in a second. And then most recently, there were the dewatering improvements to replace the belt filter press.
Sorry, can we pause for a second?
Yep, absolutely.
So I'm just trying to connect dots. So when you say like the ENR load limits based on 4 milligram per liter TN, that's the nitrogen and phosphorus reports that we get in our packets. That's what this is basically referencing, right? Okay, cool.
Yeah, so the BNR had the levels of 8 TN, total nitrogen, and 2 total phosphorus. That's the biological nutrient limits, and that's a standard that's set by the state. And then all the plants have been required, major plants and then now minor plants, to reach that 4 and 0.3. So quite a big reduction from where they were, and it's starting to approach kind of limit of technology. I'm not saying it's at limit of technology, but there is a limit to how far you can get with those. And operating an ENR level plant doesn't allow a whole lot of room for error. You got to be on your game. Okay, so those compliance issues, and again, this is looking backwards. We looked at both items at the plant and then items in the collection system. It's the wet weather flows are the primary from the collection system that are one of the primary drivers for problems at the plant. So you can see in the wet weather flows. Minimum month is around 500,000 gallons a day, which is in the neighborhood of what the water production is. You can see though that the average daily flow was 0.8, and there was a max day several years ago of 5.2. So you can see the impact that wet weather has on flows to the plant, and then that trickles down, and then there's phosphorus and nitrogen difficulties as well. So really solving those problems in the collection system go a long ways to solving your compliance issues at the plant. And I'll also point out that the load limits for total nitrogen and total phosphorus are flow-based. So even though it's an annual load that the plant is given, you really have to hit the concentrations that 4 and 0.3 if you want to make your load requirement for the year.
Sorry, can you go back?
Sure thing.
Sanitary sewer system, terracotta and PVC, long-term issue since the 80s. Can you expand on that? Like, what are we talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of the downtown area, older parts of the system were built with terracotta pipe. That's what was constructed in the 50s and 60s. And clay pipe, kind of picture like drain tile type pipe. It's brittle. I've heard rumors that the pipe that was used in Taneytown wasn't even like glazed properly. I don't know if that's true or if it's just kind of like, but it would can allow water to kind of get through it. But mainly it's the cracks. It's just brittle, and so that has been an issue that's faced the city since the 1980s. In fact, when the plant was built in 2000, I think the flow that it was designed for sort of was accepting of a large amount of that I&I. When your water system produces 0.5 and your wastewater plant's designed for 1.1 million gallons per day, you're accepting a certain level of infiltration that's just getting in your system. So it was more of a let's deal with it at the plant rather than deal with it at the source for a long time. So, and I have another slide about this, but the city's been proactively finding the I&I and trying to remove it through pipelining and pipe replacement efforts for a number of years.
We have found a lot, but there's still issues out there.
Sure.
Because this past month, what rains we have had have been coming on test days, and flows do spike a little bit, so anytime we have a higher flow on a test day, even though our milligrams per liter of our test is good, when you calculate that flow out, the pounds is what we get based off of with the state. And that crunches us very quick.
These were some, I'm not going to read through all these, but there were a number of initiatives at the plant specifically where we looked at improving redundancy, reliability of the plant, maintenance of equipment, making sure that we had spares, things like that, in addition to the work that was in the collection system, where at the time, we had replaced 2,600 feet of pipe and line over 4,000 feet, and that's the terracotta pipe. And there's a plan here and a slide or two that shows where all the terracotta pipe is in the city system, and it's a long-range plan and interest to line or replace all of it. These are those charts that you were referring to, and this is so you've probably seen this one probably back in the January or February meeting, but it showed how the plant staff effectively met the limit last year. You can see in the early part of the year, probably where flows were a little bit higher, they were trending pretty much right on the limit, but the orange, or I guess it's kind of brownish line on the bottom, you can see as the year went on, and flows were a little bit lower, and operations went well. The plant ended comfortably below their limit for both nitrogen and phosphorus last year. So far this year, things are trending about on permit pace, so very similar to last year. And this will be, I think this is 3 years now in a row that, is it 23, 24, 25, I believe all met.
Yes. And we just did submit for an O&M grant through MDE.
Oh, cool.
If you make permit, you apply for it, and per size of plant, in our plant, we get $33,000 back. That's all based on which plants do how good. So, I mean, we met, but we still may not get that money. It has been submitted this week, so hopefully we have till June to get it in.
This is the terracotta pipe rehab figure that I was referring to. So these were all the project areas that were identified, all the terracotta pipe that was identified. A number of these areas have been completed. That, Meadowbrook, in the top right corner, you can see the projects as we broke them out. They were prioritized based on the level of I&I that they thought that they were contributing. So the higher contributors and I'll also say like the easier projects to tackle were at the top of the list. Meadowbrook, kind of low-lying by that drainage through there. We found a lot of leaks that were repaired. Same deal around the elementary school. Those projects were completed. So what's left is what we call the Old Town area, so areas like Middle Street, George Street, and then Cloverberry, which is tight, and that will be a challenging project when that comes.
There are projects that still need to happen?
There are projects that still need to happen and that are to some degree in your capital improvements plan, I believe. Is that right, Jim?
Old Town and Cloverberry are yet to be done. We've done the Memorial Park Interceptor. West Baltimore Street was also done last year, and Fairground has had those point repairs done.
But the part with Old Town to replace by separate contract, that's what we already did with the ARPA, right?
Some of that,
Yeah.
Roberts Mill Road and
Broad Street.
And Broad Street.
Broad Street.
That's a good
You would
point.
still have Middle Street,
Yep.
George Street, Franklin, and Antrim Street.
Does the figure for Old Town still count the part that we've done?
In the capital improvement plan, it would not.
Okay.
I suppose in this case, this figure does, I mean, it's shown in there.
Yeah.
This is
Are we seeing any kind of increased water loss year over year with this system?
Yeah, you know, that's something, I mean, we definitely see lower flows, but to Kevin's point, I mean, it's still out there. And it is a notoriously difficult item to track because there's so many factors. The actual flow, kind of the groundwater levels. You can't just say, oh, it was a 2-inch rainstorm, it's going to be the same, because all the conditions are always are different. So it is a really hard thing to track, but that is something that I feel like it's time to kind of, it's been a while since we've done flow monitoring, so like it would be a consideration to maybe do a flow monitoring study to try to compare it back to what was done 5-6 years ago.
So it's
or
been that
something
long.
like
Yeah,
that.
my concern is increased expenses year over year from water loss, as well as if you're repairing it versus replacing it, you're just pushing it down the road. So, you know, if we have water loss, that would be obviously a concern for our residents.
Well, this is water that's getting into the pipe.
Oh, it's intruding
Yeah,
into
it's
the
not-
system.
it's not-
Oh, so it's contaminating it.
Yeah, it's
Great.
not leaks. It's
Oh,
This is on
that's
the-
even worse.
Groundwater it's groundwater that's getting
that we're
into the
treating
pipe.
at the plant.
It's groundwater that's getting into the pipe. So it's not.
Okay,
like
on the
sewage,
back
it's-
end, it's intruding into the sewer system, causing increased.
Because we still have to put the chemicals in it.
The chemicals are treating whatever the flow is, the volume that gets to
Yep.
the plant, we're treating with the chemicals. So if we get the I&I, the fresh water, groundwater out of there, it's less chemicals and less electric we're using to run equipment out there, so.
Thank you for clarifying.
I think part of, the test that we're talking about is to see with the efforts that we've already made, especially with the ARPA money that we spent, are we seeing that return on the investment, I guess, right? Because I know me and the city manager had that talk today is that, are we seeing that return on investment on the I&I part? Because again, we spent a lot of our ARPA money trying to fix some of that.
Yeah, we
So,
can
again-
we can put some numbers on that to be more, I mean, I think anecdotally, the fact that you're meeting the compliance numbers
Yeah.
are being reliably met is a good sign, but we can put some flow.
What else is involved other than this is how much we got back, this is how much we put in? What else, what other data is involved?
You mean put it out as far as like the water?
This is how many gallons we put out, this is how many gallons we got back.
Yeah, so we would compare the flows at pump stations and at the plant and the difference between like an average and a peak. So a peaking factor, you can compare that to what it was pre-rehab projects.
I think
As well
Eric,
as just a flow analysis, what are the flows like? Because, and account for what new development has happened since then.
Well, and that wouldn't be a perfect apples to apples comparison too, right? Because you're gonna have different sections of, I guess, the infrastructure that's gonna be breaking down over time too, right?
Yeah, I mean, we really see in the flow monitoring study that we did, which put flow meters at a number of locations throughout the study, it identified the terracotta pipe as the primary source of the I&I.
Yeah, so that's letting us know what sectors we're seeing some of the more I&I infiltration, essentially, right, from what you're talking about?
Correct. And then we coupled that with a manhole inspection program, which Kevin's crew looked at every manhole in the system to confirm exactly where the terracotta pipe was, because we had a pretty good idea, but we didn't know exactly where it was.
And with these projects, we're replacing our mains. And we go back to the property line, so if we're in a terracotta section and we do everything that we own underneath the street, there's still terracotta in the properties that have not been replaced, so they also allow water to come in. There's still other challenges out there for these pipes that are on private property that are homeowner responsibility.
That's a really good point that Kevin brought up, and there are technologies that we haven't used in the city to date that you can do rehab, delining rehab, similar to what we do in the mains. You can actually
Is that the like
Trenchless.
silicone almost kind of thing that expands in there and then relines it? Is that kind of what
inline, yeah, there's,
yeah.
robotic, that you can go up certain
Yeah.
dimensions. I mean, you're using the socks and the tubes
Yeah.
in the mains, but you can actually deploy those trenchlessly within the pipe to go up the laterals.
And I think we talked about that in our project near Cloverberry, where I thought it was something similar to that we were gonna have to do with that, a trenchless relining. But maybe it's a different project I'm thinking of.
Cloverberry is gonna be close because the sewer line, the mains in those properties are within 10 feet of the townhouses. So we're extremely tight with space there.
I know.
As long as the line is acceptable, because we'll do a survey and we'll see if the line falls within the criteria where we do not have to dig and replace, we can use that liner. That's the other thing. We would rather line than dig and replace, a lot cheaper.
When we say line, just to clarify that, it's the technology that we've used to date uses the existing pipe as a host pipe, and a membrane or a resin-filled sock gets placed down into that line, inflated, cured, and then the pipe that's left inside the host pipe is a structurally strong
That's what we were
pipe.
thinking of.
Yeah.
The host pipe itself
It basically
is just a host.
reinforces
it.
That could break away, and it provides no. Liner itself is structural.
You guys hang on after the meeting. I will go grab a piece that was cured and cut out for testing. I have a piece in my office. It actually looks like PVC.
Yeah, because
Once it's
I've
done.
seen a lot of the videos of those being implemented recently.
Yes.
And I know, not to say it is a factor in some of these costs, but I know when looking over some of the stuff that we had on Trevanian, for instance, again, where we had to tear down the fence to access some of that stuff that was in the back there, that is also an expense that council has to remember is some of that stuff that we do, we have to replace, whatever we took down to do it. So some of those, again, fences that we have to replace, stuff like that. So that does add to the cost as we're going through the residential neighborhoods.
While we're paused real quick, I will point out that Brian mentioned doing a flow monitoring or flow study. When we did that previously, that's what informed us as to which of those I&I projects to tackle first. So between, some of the physical conditions such as, being adjacent to a stream, so every time it rains and the stream flow comes up, there's more I&I. But those flow studies also helped us pinpoint which projects to tackle first. So we got kind of the biggest reduction in I&I with those earlier projects.
Would that be included in the study that me and you have been talking about? That's going to be part of the presentation, or might not be part of the presentation tonight?
So what Brian touched on early on is the idea of C.D.M. Smith doing a detailed study for both water and sewer systems to help us better plan our capital improvement program and basically plan for the long-term sustainability and function of the system.
But I guess for that, would that include like the flow rate study as well? Because when you need to know that as far as what projects to tackle first in that improvement program?
It could. It certainly could. As of the draft scope that I provided.
I know
the other
we'll
day
get to
doesn't
it
have
later,
anything, but we could certainly. That could be part of it.
Just while we're talking about the flow rate study, yeah.
And honestly, you could just look at. Kind of previously identified that terracotta is the main area that we're attacking. You could just look at pump station flows and plant flows and try to do a comparison to essentially
The places that have the newer infrastructure versus the older?
Well, it wouldn't be able to pinpoint, but it would be able to say, is all the work that we've done to date, what is it
Contributing.
gotten us? Yeah, how much, I think.
'Cause that's really my question is, again, I know we did the ARPA work, we spent a lot of money with the ARPA, again, doing the Broad Street, Roberts Mill and whatnot. And what I think, did Fairground, when we did Fairground Ave, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, okay.
Yeah, what's left is what's in the middle here. I should be more clear about that, but yeah, it's what's left.
I know it's marked as, haven't been done and whatnot. I'm just, I think we've done a couple of bigger projects now. So I think it is, it is coming time to see if we are seeing the benefits of what we had done there.
So we don't have data currently about the differences of I&I before and after projects?
A lot of the projects we have done are not flowing to any of our pump stations. It's straight to the plant. So it's all gravity in those sections. So we would have to do some flow meters, sensors in the lines to see that.
Because what you're seeing at the plant is a blend of where we've done improvements and where we haven't done improvements. So it wouldn't be overly conclusive. A flow monitoring study would be would be better. But we could still probably draw some conclusions from a focused evaluation of the plant flows, but we haven't done that to date.
I'm going to jump in, and Kevin, I'm sorry to put you on the spot a little bit, but as we have completed these projects, so we don't have, as Brian mentioned in the beginning, we can't equate a 2-inch rain, in this many hours is going to drive this much I&I, because there are so many other factors. What's the water level in the ground to start with? What's the temperature? How hard does it rain? In what period of time? There's so many variables that we can't really say. We don't have data that says, a 1-inch rain, over 24 hours on this before this project equated to this many gallons of I&I. And we did this project, and now a 1-inch rain equates to this. But anecdotally, Kevin has reported to me as these projects have gone on, and and this was probably more a focus with the previous council when we were doing these projects, that we've seen that during heavy rain events, when historically the plant would go into storm mode and additional influent pumps would have to kick on, that instead of it happening in the first hour of the storm, it might happen like 10 hours later, or only one additional pump would kick on instead of 2. So we know that it's making a difference and has made a difference in the plant flows. That we can compare, historically, a downpour like this would have set off all kinds of alarms at the plant, and now it's not. But again, because there are so many other factors to
So I make sure
the groundwater, it's really hard to provide solid data that says, this project reduced this much I&I.
Just so I make sure I'm following what you're saying, so the pumps used to kick on, like, just say an hour into a storm, and that's because there's so much flow coming in that the pumps have to turn on, and you're saying now they're coming on much later
If they're
because there's
coming on at all.
significantly less flow, and they don't have to come on earlier, basically.
And I think Kevin could speak to
That's-
that in more detail, and I
Is
saw
that
you
the
were
way to
pulling up some
understand it? I'm
numbers.
trying to boil this down into something simple so I can wrap my mind around it. Okay.
To answer that, before we did these projects, if we got 1.5 inches of rain, say, we would go from our normal flow about 500,000 gallons a day when it was dry. We would immediately crest to over 2 million gallons right after that storm. Which, when that happens, we're looking at normally one pump running, pumps down, our wet well shuts off. During that storm, we have 4 pumps out there. All 4 of them would be on, and we would just be flowing at the max that plant could handle. 5 million gallons would handle, and as he showed, there was a peak flow of 5.2, so we were above what the plant is technically capable of handling. But it still met permit during that. I mean, it was pushing it, but we could do it. But since that has happened, a 1.5-inch rain is now showing, well, if we're at 500,000 before the rain starts, say we're apples to apples, same conditions, dry weather, that 1.5 inches that used to go to 2.2, 2.5 million is now barely getting to just below 1 million gallons. So we have cut a lot of water out of that system, but there is still a lot to go. When we get these rainfalls, we shouldn't see big spikes. Now, if we go for multiple days of rain, it will slowly creep back up. It will go closer to the 2 million gallons because the
Like we're
ground gets
about to
saturated and it's
experience,
just,
right? Yeah.
it's constantly pouring in. So there are areas that we still need to tackle.
Just remind me, one project, Westview, was that sewer as well on Westview, or just road?
That was just
That was
water.
just
paved?
water main.
Okay.
Water
Main, okay.
Old water main that was constantly popping because it was setting on rock.
Yeah, I can remember if we did any sanitary.
The sanitary sewer in that section is PVC
Okay,
and is holding up pretty well.
okay.
Adding on to one thing Kevin said there, the I&I is inflow, which is water that that gets directly in, like through a pipe opening or through an illegal connection or something where there's like a direct connection from what allows groundwater or, well, rainwater to get into the pipe, as opposed to infiltration, which is coming through the ground. I mean,
And soaking
that's
in,
why
yeah.
when you hear, when that like quick response, that's usually inflow. There's connection, there's a storm drain that's connected, or there's some other sump pump that's connected in the basement can be a very common thing. You know, something in a home where they have a drain line connected that shouldn't go to the sewer, versus infiltration, which is getting in through cracks in the piping, and it's slower because the rainwater's got to work its way down through the ground to get to it. So that's why maybe you see we're addressing maybe the inflow, maybe more than the infiltration, but
The, some of the inflow coming in was in this in the old section downtown before streetscape. Downspouts on houses were connected, and when we did the sewer lines and stuff, they were piped straight through the sidewalk now.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
they flow out into the drain.
I'm sure some of council's probably seen where when you go down the businesses and whatnot, it goes straight down. Like you can actually see the downspouts go straight into the ground.
But they used to, underground, they went straight into the ground before, and they went right into the sewer line.
Yeah.
Now they have been rerouted to come through the sidewalk and come out into the road and hit the storm
Yeah,
drain.
because that's what the holes are on the, yep, on the side so they can come out when, yeah. Yeah.
Well, I know, I deal in numbers, so that's,
no, we can get you some numbers.
yeah, I was gonna say, my big thing is we should know with all of the projects that we've done, what the differences are. Now, it sounds like we have a little bit of an idea with some averages, but that seems like something that we should be tracking after we do these, so that we know what we've got and what has happened.
Streetscape also helped a lot with the water loss.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we'll
because
talk
that
about
cut
that.
down significantly.
Yes.
I think what it comes down to, the question for council is again, we have, I want to say, we have some data, but not direct data that shows what's happening in count. You know, the question of council is do you want more direct data, or is the data that is being shown that it's working is enough? If you want more direct data, that is going to be a cost. There's going to be a cost to do
I
an
would just
extra
say
study.
some basic data, and that would be kind of what I described before, which is like if we go back to before like the Meadowbrook project, if we go back 5 or so years and we compare peaking factors of, you know, what's the peak divided by the average, and you wanted that number to be, I mean, like 2, 2.5, 3, versus, you know, so we can look at that at the plant level.
Yeah.
Granted that there's areas that are not rehabbed that are going to that, and it's sort of it's an average of unrehabbed, rehabs, and PVC sections, but I think it should provide a glimpse into it. It's not going to be this project removed this many gallons, but it's going to be an overall picture, and that's a relatively easy thing.
Overall is fine. I just want to figure out, like, do we have some basis to be able to say cost spent, benefit gained? And it could be high level. It doesn't have to be every single project, and it sounds like we have some loose data. We are making good conclusions. We've had peaks of 5 million, and that's obviously the max right there, and the new norm for maxes is around 2 million. Of course, if we have a major rain, we get closer to the 5, but we're not in the danger zone as bad as we used to be, and there's still progress to be made is what I'm gathering. Is that fair?
That's fair, and
Okay.
those numbers would not be, those would be
Yeah.
relatively simple to pull together.
Yep, and so my ask would be, you know, go ahead and pull that together. My ask to council would be between now and as the budget comes up in May, think about if you want something more comprehensive after they show you that data. So, because that would be the time to initiate it and budget it. If council wants a more comprehensive study than the data that they come back with on that, you know, just be thinking on that between now and the meeting in May.
I'd say if we have averages over time and timing of projects, we can pretty much get a rough idea. I mean, I don't need it down to like the 10-gallon.
It's definitely gonna be a rough idea, because like I said, with the homeowner side of the lines that have not been maintained, from the time we did the project and we saw a good reduction, their lines could have deteriorated even more to let water flow back in. So it is lack of better terms, a crapshoot to get a good nailed down number, because those lines have continued to deteriorate through the years.
There's wet years, there's also wet years and dry years, so it's kind of hard to say.
So what would
We'll-
be?
we'll do our best,
What would be the primary benefit of doing the additional study? Like, we can get averages, what,
Sounds like
You
we'd
could
be able to
con-
draw conclusions
yeah.
easier, but we could probably still draw conclusions without spending the money as
well,
well.
that's what I'm
You'd
trying to
be-
figure out. 'cause,
You'd
like,
be able to compare it to the
Data's
old
good.
study that we had on, because again, we had a flow study done before. So basically what you do is some of the work that we've already done is you do a flow study on that work and compare it to the data that we had before. So we've already done a flow study before, so you already have data to compare it to. This would be another direct comparison. Again, it's just
We're
going to give
comparing
you,
6-year-old data with material that has deteriorated more over 6 years, to his point, contributing to more problems and new houses that weren't there on the old study. So we'd be really making stretches to try to make that data make sense. It
well,
sounds
not
But
on
would
the
it
Broad
help you
Street
guys
area.
is really
where
what
we
I'm
just-
asking.
Yeah.
Like, would it help you guys better identify problem areas, or do you already pretty much think you know where the problem areas are? Like, I think that's also what I'm trying to figure out.
We have a good idea where the problem areas are, but putting flow meters back out in the same manholes we did our original flow study in would give us an idea of, hey, is something in that area reappeared, or another monster has emerged that we need
Was
to
there
figure?
something else contributing to
So
it?
would
We need to find, hey,
What's a ROM, a rough order magnitude for cost for something like that?
what I was looking up when we got into the other stuff.
It's been a while since I've looked at those. I can't recall.
I'm not sure if everybody's been in town long enough to, or is in town during the day enough to see this, but on East Baltimore Street, very close to Broad, the intersection of Broad and East Baltimore, there is a manhole that basically every other really intense hard rain, this manhole would surcharge, and you could drive by and see water spouting up out of that manhole at the bottom of the hill at Broad Street. That doesn't happen anymore.
I remember
And,
that.
and we, you know, and we can be, if that makes it into the storm drain system, you know, we can incur fines and things like that for
These meters
overflows.
stay in long-term, or do you put them in and they come out?
Several months you leave them in usually.
Would it better allow you to figure out if you need to replace a unit or make a higher priority decision? Would that help you as well with this?
I think it's mainly, like, part of what Kevin was saying is, again, someone like Broad Street, for instance, it would help us identify if what we did on Broad Street is contributing, and again, it is contributing in some way to the I&I, but is there something else now that is also contributing to the I&I on Broad Street other than what we did on that project? That's kind of what they're explaining here, is it will allow us to identify if, again, the bigger projects that we're doing, if they're actually tackling the issue, or if there's something we're missing and something else contributing that we're just not getting when we're doing these projects. So it basically would be a double check on the projects that we have done. And again, that would give us a better basis when we're going to do the other projects that we know, yes, they are contributing fully for the amount of money that we're being spent on them. That'd be my summary on it.
Yeah. I mean, even with that, it will be hard to necessarily like pinpoint if there's a private lateral that's deteriorated. You
Yeah.
know, we'll put a flow meter, you know, at a certain point and, you know, say that spikes with a rain event. You know, we have the ability to go in, clean a line, televise it, see if there are any problems in the main, but
But that doesn't mean
pinpointing
we
like
can
which
detect it,
which
yeah.
lateral is, you know, the big contributor, you know, would be very difficult.
I'd say what it does is give us and again, I'm not advocating one way or the other, I'm just saying what the study would help do is it would help give the city further confidence
Right.
of the projects that it has done. The money, again, the ARPA money that was spent on those projects was a significant amount of money. So before we start hitting some of these other bigger projects, it would give us more confidence to know that what we did has achieved the goal that we were looking for.
As I say, we do need to know. We need to know what the projects have done, whether they are effectual of what we're trying to get done, or how it's actually affecting the system. So
And
If
I
you-
think the two different methods are looking at almost at two different things. I think the average method that you guys can do now is more backward-looking to let us know that, hey, the things that we did in the past have helped or not helped. And installing these meters would help us be more forward-looking and give us information to
Allow us to
be
calculate what
confident
might be contributed
and
by
yeah.
further projects.
So it's almost like they're serving, there's
They're
gonna
two
be some
different
overlap, but
goals.
it's almost like they're serving two different goals.
They are. When you think about it again, one reassures you that I&I is going down, the other reassures you that the money you're spending, you can actually track how much, kind of, again, you get a better estimate of how much I&I you're actually subtracting, and that'll allow you to make a better estimate of what these bigger projects are contributing,
I was
essentially.
gonna say, it's just a difference in granularity at that point of, you can do the overall, we put out $500,000, we got back $750,000, or, and do that average over time and such,
I mean, if you're
or
looking
you
for
can
like
look
an
at
ROI,
individual
like a
projects.
return on investment type
Yeah.
calculation, I mean, we are certainly are talking, many years for us to, recover the cost of, we certainly have not
And
Yeah,
just
I'm
so-
not,
saved
I'm not
$6 million
necessarily, yeah, I'm not
of
necessarily looking at that.
electricity
It's
and
things that need to be
chemicals.
done.
I think it just helps with the longer term planning,
But-
is what it does.
We need to make sure that it's doing what
Right.
it's working as advertised.
Well, and now since Mayor Miller has been in office, he came in for the tail end of our, I guess, compliance challenges with the Department of the Environment for wastewater. So as Brian mentioned, we had problems meeting permit, from the start with the enhanced nutrient removal and the tighter numbers there. So with some of these projects we've done, reducing the flows to the plant, that has helped with compliance, but also we've made some operational changes at the treatment plant itself. We requested a meeting with MDE. It probably took the better part of 2 years to get a face-to-face with them. And fortunately, I think it was November when we finally met with them.
November.
And, they were, when we were able to report that, we were on track to meet permit that year, the whole demeanor, in the room of the MDE staff kind of changed.
Between the stats we were
because-
able to present and whatnot, again,
because
we
they
were
were looking at,
negotiating it
the
down.
historic information and the fact that we hadn't met permit. And at any rate, they were threatening some very hefty fines. And, not that they always apply and get these fines from local governments or operators who violate permit, but we negotiated basically a settlement rather than, and MDE will always come out and say, we have the authority to fine you however many $1,000s a day that you're in violation, and, they offered to settle at whatever. And, we went back and forth and negotiated a lower number, and, we walked in there knowing we're going to pay something. But, we were able to, and this just popped up in the last couple of days when we were looking at some historic budget figures. We ended up, I think, settling at $47,000.
And they wanted 70.
And I think
something.
originally it was,
75.
originally it was over 100.
Yeah, it was
And
$10,000 a day,
and
I
then
think, yeah, or something.
Brian and company evaluated all their numbers and kind of contested their conclusions, and they came back with a lower number. And,
I thought we did
once
40,
we,
was it 40 or 47? I thought we did 40. Yeah, we did 40.
maybe it was,
Yeah, 40
Okay,
40 is
okay.
what we settled at, yeah.
Okay.
Not,
But,
again, just,
but yeah. So, we were fortunate, but I think, had we not been on track to meet permit and met permit that year, they probably would not have been as willing to reduce that number. But even that it was still months after year end before, they
like 3 or 4 months, I think.
closed it out.
Yeah.
I want
We
to say it
didn't
was
hear back.
April that.
Yeah, we didn't hear back till about April, and again, because we contacted them December, hey, what's going on? Again, we didn't hear back till like April.
Yeah.
But
So how, roughly, if we wanted to install the meters to get additional data, roughly how much does that cost? I think you were looking that up.
In 2020, we did 7 meters and a rain gauge. So they actually calculate all of their flows and with their rain gauge so they can see for 2 months. In 2020, it was $32,560. We can get a proposal from them just to see what it would be in current figures and get it to you.
So 50.
because it is going to be higher than what we paid back then.
2 months is about the minimum you'd want to do. That's one for sure. Yeah, you wouldn't want to go less than that. A lot of times they're in for 6 months.
Because again, you want to be able to track different instances and different conditions.
And I always say, I really do not want rain in the area, but during the 2 months that they're in, I want to see some rain, at least a couple days, so we can get some data that,
So it'll be skewed if we have a dry spell or if we have the opposite. It's just gonna be part of
We
that.
might not
both
get good data. We
extremes.
might have to extend it
Yeah.
till we get some good.
Now, if we
some
all
flows.
turn on our sprinklers,
please, no.
We'll talk about that later.
Yeah, don't recommend.
No, not gonna make me mad, just please no.
So would we want to do 7 meters in one rain gauge again, or are we more, less, like what?
I think we'd want to
I'd
do
replicate
similar.
it.
Yeah, replicate it to see
Seven-
what we get back.
7 meters was spread out that it broke us down into quadrants that we could get the data you're seeing on this screen right now.
So it'd be the same number of meters, like we're not doubling the number of meters for whatever reason because
No,
more,
I
okay.
wouldn't, so.
And this was what year?
2020.
yeah, I would do the exact same thing, exact same places, get an apples to apples.
And it just again, I know this is newer infrastructure. Meads, how? I know we've talked since we've assumed some of Meads stuff, and I know we've had a couple issues out there. What is staff's feeling about Meads infrastructure? Are we expecting any issues that we're gonna have to immediately resolve anytime soon? Again, I think there were some initial issues with when we took it over, right?
There were, and I think Kevin can probably speak to them in more detail than I can, but we refused to accept the infrastructure in part because they had a lot of punch list items that they took a very long time to take care of, but also because we were seeing there's a sewer pumping station on Grant Street in Meads, and we were seeing numbers in a brand new collection system, conveyance system, spiking with rainfall. And that indicated that there was an existing I&I problem there. And we had not accepted that yet from the developer. So we advised them that we were not going to accept it with those spikes.
Have we seen any reoccurrence of that since?
And it has been, I believe it has been steady since we've accepted it. There still is some increase after rain events. And again, no system is going to be 100%, leak,
My worry is
proof, but they did bring the numbers down substantially, and they made a number of improvements. There were some things that just were perhaps not ideal design that weren't caught, that they had some manholes that were very close to, if not in flow channels in the roads. And so during heavy rains, the water would just flow in the holes of the manholes. So I think we put liners or something like that in to seal them.
Is there a difference in, I guess, the construction that they did there as far as the sewer and water infrastructure goes that would be different from what we did on like the rehab of Broad, for instance? Like, is there something?
Well,
I'm just wondering, is there anything to be worried about Meads going forward? Is it? And because again, that's just because there is development that's currently in talks. I want to make sure that. And I know it's hard because again, Meads is still very new relative in terms of
and
data.
I don't want to speak, poorly of a
I know.
developer, and the developer did, ultimately did everything we asked them to do, and overall they were very good to work with. So I'm not trying to condemn the project or anything, but I think for a relatively new community, there has been a disproportionate number of, or have been a disproportionate number of problems with water and sewer laterals and things like that in that community.
Is there anything we need to change in our process?
But
if
that would
something else...
not be related to things that we would inspect, that we would accept.
Yeah. And that's kind of wondering. I'm wondering if there's anything we need to change in our process for future developments to make sure we aren't tied with infrastructure that might have been cheap. Again, not,
There-
but
they
might have been cheaper to implement than
and
what
we
we're
did have
doing.
some issues with, while the community was being constructed, and Kevin can probably elaborate on this, but we had some inflow issues where there were, the crew would leave at the end of the work week and they would leave a pipe that was connected to the system open in a trench. So it rains over the weekend and water flows into the trench and flows right into the pipe. So that was kind of an eye-opener to me, that we didn't have anything in place that said, you can't
You
do that.
cap it or something.
That, right, that you can't leave, that at the end of the workday, things have to be, at least temporarily capped or something like that. So we will know, next time with our next major project and public works agreement that, that's something we might want to tweak.
I was gonna
so
say,
that,
do we have that
don't
in place
those
now?
conditions.
Do we have that in place now? Or do we
Like
still
if
need
another
to do
development
that?
happened, that they'd have to have it
I was
capped.
gonna say,
No,
because
we
we
would
got
do a
Garnet
new public
Ridge
works
and we
agreement
got
with
Yeah,
them,
yeah,
and I
Mountain
think that's
Brook.
where we would
But
speak to it.
we will have addressed it. Again, we know
Yeah.
more of what we need to address if
Right.
it happens again.
Right, and we haven't had a subdivision come through since then.
I'm pretty sure those two, the next two developments, I don't think their public works agreements have been.
No,
No, they're
no,
not
no,
even
no.
close to
We will make
drafted.
sure that's. in
Okay.
there.
right.
I just wanted to make sure it's somewhere
That's-
in
yeah,
the process
That's at the
to
tail
where
end
we
of,
can,
that's
yeah.
after plans are approved, but before construction starts, we do the public works agreement.
Superintendent is watching the meeting, so he just texted me something that, back to the rainfall and flows coming to the plant. Some of you that have went on the tours, the bar screen where we first come in, before we've done these projects, when we get a heavy rain, that bar screen area would go underwater by 10 feet.
I remember you telling us
Yeah,
that.
yeah, I remember
It's
talking
just,
about
just
that. one.
a reminder, and since we've done these projects, that has not even come up out of the bar screen, so with these flows.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm
It's
not
it's-
trying to poke
Oh,
hole. I'm,
no,
I'm,
no,
saying-
I'm
I'm
just-
fully expecting there to be
I know.
a step
And
down.
I was gonna say,
New
since
I
you're,
mean,
council
just
member
have-
hasn't been on a tour
I
yet.
just have to
know
ask
you-
the
We haven't got
questions.
around to being on,
And
taking
I
you
was-
on a tour.
yeah,
but
since you're new, I was gonna
just
say, you
trying
should
to
reach
say
out,
There's
try
an
to-
area where we
I didn't
couldn't
even
even
think of
walk in because it didn't come up out of the ground and get on the ground where we had to report it. It was pretty much contained in a tank, but it was literally that 10 feet of water for a couple hours before it would pump down. It was like a holding tank before it got it pumped
Yeah.
into the system, so. There's just some things there that have, since we've done these projects, have gotten extremely better for that plant.
okay, in the interest
Sorry,
of,
back to the meters and rain gauge. Do you guys think that juice would be worth the squeeze or no?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
So I want to circle back to what we were originally talking about, the addition of these meters. Do you guys think that it's worth putting in these meters to collect that data or no?
I do.
could I ask something of staff is to prepare a memo for council on a recommendation one way or the other on the flow meters, and again, just explain out, why we're making this recommendation, what the goal is, and again, we'll distribute that with council.
Yeah. I mean, I think the cost will probably be somewhere between
And
like
yeah, what the cost
45 and
estimate
like
is.
$70,000, depending on how inflation's happened over the last
And,
7
yeah.
years or so.
And
so
this is going to be
that's my
something
guess.
that I can't imagine, prices are not going to go down since
No.
2020.
No,
So,
no
this
shot.
is something that's going to exceed the threshold for us to be able to award a contract to a vendor without it going before council. So when we get to that point, well, first, we'll make it,
But we could
the
always
final
inquire
decision
and shoot it
that
down if
we,
it's too much money.
right,
Yeah,
that we,
yeah.
Okay.
Well,
that we do
I
see
mean,
the benefit and we can,
And that's what, first I want to do the memo, so council can think on that as
Right.
we're getting into budget season, because no matter what, my question next month when we're talking about budget is going to be, are you guys interested in trying to budget this? Because if so, I want to try to budget it now as opposed to an amendment.
because this,
Understood.
right, but this would be under the professional services line item in the
And again,
wastewater,
we're
in the
we're
sewer
just,
budget.
we're just
Contracts to
now
you
trying to
guys?
get numbers in line,
Is
so.
this something you
In
do
the
or something?
in the past, we helped frame the scope for the project and negotiate the contract, and then we handed it to Kevin and said,
This is what you're looking for?
this is.
They help us facilitate getting all the numbers together,
Yep.
and then we take over. They pretty much wait for the reports to come in and be able to analyze.
Right, and then we'll look at the end, the results at the end. Okay.
We have not made it into too many slides for an hour, but.
All right, so, and we've touched on some of this already, but as far as like thinking again back to the goals and from a sewer perspective, and this is kind of mirrored in that proposal, that draft proposal that was discussed earlier, but, planning considerations around sewer would be around plant capacity, so looking at growth areas and the impact on the plants, looking at I&I, all those sort of things, what's the plant capacity look like? Effluent reuse is something that's come up a couple times just lightly in conversation about, and the idea there is it's water reuse, it's higher level treatment for potential other uses of your effluent other than discharging it down the creek. Maybe that's something that the city is interested in. Any water that doesn't go down the creek also doesn't count against your permit, your load for nitrogen and phosphorus, so that's an added benefit. Not sure if there's any uses out there, but
What are we talking about here?
the idea of your wet effluent, so that's what leaves the plant. You can reuse that in some areas of the country where
They use it for
drinking water-
fertilizer and all kinds of stuff, right?
Use it for golf course irrigation, park irrigation, industrial uses. There's
Indirect
ways you
potable
can-
reuse.
Indirect potable reuse, if you want to go really far, not. too
Westminster.
Westminster, yeah.
Yes, thank you, yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's what I thought we were talking about, but I wasn't, I just wanted to make sure I was on the same page. All
Yeah,
right.
so I just, again, it's come up in conversation a couple times with staff. I don't know if particular applications were being considered, but there was conversations, and further treatment would be necessary, pumping stations. Just something to, if we wanted that to be part of this study, that certainly could be.
And real quick,
Yep.
we keep talking permit. We did just receive our new discharge permit for the plant today from the state. There's about 15 to 20 new testing requirements that we have to add to what we've already been doing. So we're talking PFAS of the effluent, and part of it is influent, and treating of the biosolids. We have to test the PFAS in that. PFAS.
Are PFAS going out?
Yes, we actually have, our sludge has been tested
Yeah.
for the
Yeah.
PFAS because there is a requirement, there is a 3-tiered system for sludge application to fields. If you're below a certain number, full bore on how much you can apply for nutrients. We are actually in tier 2, so they have to reduce how much they put on ours that goes onto the field. If we would hit tier 3,
It can't.
nothing can go into the fields, it has to go to landfill, which is extremely expensive.
Before
I'm
we,
just letting you know, there are some testing, I'm gonna be meeting with Brian next week to discuss this permit and make sure we're getting everything lined up, that we are following this permit and not being, we don't miss anything, because last thing I wanna do is come back to you guys saying, we missed something on this new permit, state's wants to fine us for a violation. That is-
Are you guys gonna be talking if there's anything additional we have to do as far as additions, I guess?
Well, the added testing that we're gonna have to do and making sure we get the proper protocol in place that we don't miss the new guidelines, because
Does the state test quarterly? Is it quarterly?
it
I'm just curious. It's
depends
not-
on the size and of the facility. Like our water now, looking at what testing is coming down here in the next year, with the amount of volume or residents we have, we're talking twice a year.
Twice a year, okay.
At the treatment plant, there's some tests that are done 3 times a day, some that
Yeah.
are done 3 times a week, some that are done once a year. There's a variety.
Question, just because budget time.
Yeah,
Is
this
is that the one we have to send out?
PFAS? Yeah, oh,
No,
yes.
no, is that the one we have to send out the water test report, the one that's moved to 2 times a year? 'Cause I know we send out the one.
No, the water quality report is
Okay,
still.
okay.
this
Just making
month.
sure that isn't the same one. That's still just once a year, right?
That's part of the results we get from the testing.
Okay.
That is the results that we put out, but we have to test, we're gonna have to be testing PFAS twice a year soon.
How often does the state test the well sites? Like,
They have, we have a contract lab that comes in and does testing
Yeah.
for us, and then the state does come in.
subcontracted through the state, yeah. I
Oh, no,
would
we
assume.
actually have our lab.
Oh,
We have
okay,
a
okay.
certified lab that comes in and it takes samples and does testing.
Okay.
Then the state also comes on over top of that and does testing as well.
Yeah, I'm talking state testing.
They come in, they call us and say, hey, it's time for testing. So
Yeah,
It is
I know how it
literally,
works, but,
Just whenever.
sometimes it's twice a year, sometimes we
Twice a-
could see them
okay.
3 times, depending on which wells they're saying they have to pull.
just surprising. Normally
Now,
it's like-
maybe I missed this, but what's preventing us from going back to tier 1 for the biosolids, I think you were saying? Like, what's keeping us in the tier 2 land?
The PFAS.
PFAS.
Yes.
Yeah, just the
It's
PFAS
just that and
detection's
everything
going
else
up.
is good.
Everything else is good that we were there, but the new requirements for
They're becoming
PFAS
stricter and
is-
stricter on PFAS, which is mind-boggling to me just because the state hasn't pushed out money to help treat. And again, I know they're helping with, I'm not gonna talk too much on the state,
This
but I
is the
know,
same state that put stuff in the
I-
Potomac River, right?
listen,
And
I-
didn't care about that?
I know they're trying to help where they can, but again, the PFAS stuff really bothers me because to keep raising some of the requirements, again, the new tests and everything like that, it's just not going to it, but it's a little bit ridiculous with them not pushing any direct funds down to the municipalities to do it, because,
That's like
Again,
the O&M grant that I had just applied
Yeah.
for the treatment
and I know,
plant.
yeah,
That has been pushed to the state from the Bay Restoration Fund. So if you meet permit, they're trying to give you money back to help because they already realize, testing wise, we've been spending a heck of a lot more money to make,
unfortunately, the 30,000 is only,
oh, it's a drop in the
it's a drop
bucket.
in the bucket, so.
Do we have
Everybody helps.
do we have a rough idea of where the PFAS is coming from on the inflow? Because we don't have it going on the outflow or on the water
You're
at
talking
the
about, like,
moment.
You're talking about
Specific
when it's pumped
areas?
from the wells, right?
No, just in general, do we have an idea?
Say there is definitely PFAS coming out, though?
It's
There-
kind of, yeah,
No,
definitely
there-
PFAS
We're
going
if we're
out.
getting PFAS at the sewer site and we're not allowed to have PFAS in the water coming from the
It's from
wells.
it's gonna be from the
where-
runoff, right? I mean,
There is some in the wells.
yeah, we
It's-
know,
It's
we
under
know.
it's under
yes.
the
So it's
regulated permits.
accumulation of the permitted amount of acceptable PFAS on the inside and something in the intrusion side and then something from the outs. So it's a
Well,
combination of all of it, more or
I'm
less.
gonna tell you, you're gonna see
Coming
some
right-
just from the
coming right
runoff
your
and the
houses When
stormwater.
you're using
mean-
nonstick pans, older pans that are being scratched, you're
Drinking
getting,
out of my
you're getting it
PFAS
from
water bottle.
clothing.
Yeah, the
You're
Teflon
getting-
stuff, yep.
My water bottle has it, so.
Yes, everything is, there's microscopic amounts going in from everybody's home. I mean, it's in everything you have, every product you have. But
The
there
clothes,
are
your
limits
bottles.
there are some in the wells. I mean, we actually, one of our wells has been turned off for almost 4 years now because it exceeded the limit. So that's part of the projects we're doing now. With your part on, we have grants for putting treatment on 3 of our wells that are
Yep,
the
I know
one,
we-
the
I know
one
we
is,
talked
the
about
one
that.
is over and it's been off. 12 is gonna catch because 11 is where we're putting both of those get treated at the same site.
Yeah, at the same site, yep.
The grants that we have there are, principal forgiveness. So we're just
Yeah.
gonna be paying interest on it. So they are giving money, but we're paying
Yeah.
interest for 10 years and after 10 years, the principal disappears. So it'll show on our books as we have a loan, but after 10 years, that will go away.
Yeah.
But we're just paying
And
interest for those
Again,
10.
is that locked in? Like, there's no chance of, I don't know, something happening at the state level?
Not awarded yet, right?
But I
So-
mean,
Those two are.
yeah, we got,
Those 2 grants are.
So they're contract bound, that as long as we do our part, they do their
I
part?
don't think we've got to.
We have not, we are working on an RFP right now with
Yeah.
CDM Smith.
But I guess my question is the part from the state, the principal forgiveness part. Again, is that locked in? Like, there's no chance of that being, I don't know, stripped down the road or anything like that? Has anybody take a look at the wording language, I guess? Again, I highly doubt it would, but you never know because of what's all going on state budget wise.
Yes. I cannot answer that question.
Yeah, if just somebody can take a look, just to be 100%, just to be on the safe side. I wouldn't want.
Pose that question right to MDE.
We're asking a lot of
How-
questions,
how
so we do
much-
appreciate you taking the time to be thorough with us tonight.
That's not a
How
problem.
much money are we talking about with this interest-only loan grant, whatever you want to classify it as?
Well, that was in the,
Like, is this a multi-million-dollar grant? Is this,
It is.
It is.
those,
okay.
some of those too, right? Looking at the CIP, it would be one of the water projects, it's line items 5 and 6. That's right around $3 million.
Sorry, say that number again?
3 million
Thank you.
3 million total, or 3 million apiece?
total.
3 million total? Okay, so,
Three wells.
11, 12, and 14.
And
And we expect that to be at least a little future-proof, right, on the PFAS aspect? Again, I know it's hard to tell with how requirements change and whatnot, but,
As far as the levels that it would treat to?
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
They
there's
go
all-
above and beyond, I guess, what's being asked.
And that money that is coming from the grant, after doing reviewing these projects with CDM, that is not gonna cover the complete project.
Yeah.
That's, unfortunately, we were hoping that that would cover it completely, but it is not.
So if we get that $3 million grant, do we have any idea what the rate's gonna be on that? Like 3, 5, 8?
At the interest part, how much of the interest we're paying on it? He's asking like, how much do we expect that to add into
So
debt
that-
well, I guess not debt service,
It
but
wouldn't
how,
be that- it would
it's gonna be in the
eat up
line,
the
in the,
interest expense.
Yeah.
We don't have that in the
but
current thing.
I
'cause we
guess,
don't know when it's
I guess that'll
happening.
also be offset by, are we still expecting additional checks on the PFAS settlement stuff? I can't remember
I
where
think-
we're at on that.
I think there are some, so I believe we've gotten
Done
all the
two?
the
Yeah,
bigger
the two big
ones.
ones, right?
But there are still some smaller players, I think, that have not come through.
Because we do get PFAS checks every once in a while. I don't know if we've had one since the new council's been here.
We've
That's,
gotten a
that's
couple.
fine, I'm
not-
just trying to figure out
Yeah,
what
what
the
the cost
additional
is gonna be.
debt service,
We've-
if it's, I mean, if we're talking a rate of 5% where it's $150,000 a year on the interest rate, I mean, revenues can come in to offset it, fine, I just trying to get a
Yeah,
general
I
sense
know
of
you're,
like
you're,
what.
you're
what-
trying to
what
figure
the-
out
what
how
the
much
expense is
we're gonna be
be.
paying on it.
We have not formally encumbered those funds, but we are tracking them to apply them to the PFAS remediation projects as needed, though.
And
Sorry, what would this $3 million grant go to do exactly?
Design and construct GAC, granular activated carbon contactors is the kind of the baseline proven technology to remove. So it's similar to, well, it's the same as the
this is going directly into the well, sorry,
treatment.
not to cut it
yeah,
off.
it's on
right?
the, it's on
Yeah.
the, so the water comes out of the well.
Yeah.
In between removing it from the ground and the chlorination, there'd be this large contactor tank
I guess
that absorbs the PFAS and has a life of a period of time, years, couple years before it has to, you start seeing breakthrough of the PFAS compounds and you have to replace it.
yeah,
But it's
replace the filter unit.
It's a fairly straightforward treatment system. You're just passing it through a big tank.
One question that's popping into
So
my
I can
mind.
think of it like a big filter.
Yeah,
But it's not really filtering it, it's absorbing it onto it, but,
Well, yeah, I'm just
so
trying
is
to,
it going to address,
and you'd need building space to do
is
it.
it going to have any other issues with, again, some of our harder water? Is like any, like,
The biggest issues
for
with
the
it are,
limestone stuff, is any of that going to deteriorate how fast some of these filters, and I'm assuming yes, because of how my filters go in my fridge.
To say it kills everything else.
it's iron and manganese are the two
Yeah, that
common
it-
items, and that was one of the items I've been working with Kevin on to just, and I don't think we have that data, so that's gonna be one of the recommendations is to get that data, because in some systems that have high iron and manganese, you have to pre-treat that.
Okay. Well, I guess technically it's also going to help with some of the water that's going out. I don't know. Will it be less hard if it's taking
It
some of those
will not
out?
remove hardness.
Okay.
It'll make it like look clearer though, right? And then I think it
It would remove other
makes it the
organic
smell
compounds.
different. Yeah.
Because like in well 9, you have that for the PCE contamination,
Yep, yep.
GAC. So
It's
it does
just-
remove other, volatile organic.
And I'm not sure if everybody on council is aware, but for the most part, our wells, when the water's pumped up, the only thing used is really chlorine.
I mean, that's a good thing too, though, removing VOCs. I mean,
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
how
So
many
it's
of
definitely-
these things would this build?
three.
How many of these things would this
One
build?
for each well.
well, it would be 2 of them. 11 and 12 are treated together, and then
Where'd that-
14.
where'd I
It
get
treats,
three
it treats three, but
Three
yeah,
wells.
two.
Oh, 3 wells.
It's
There we go.
two are
Yeah.
together.
Did I hear you right, there's a
Two
potential
not
shortfall?
fil-
Oh, sorry, Nick.
2 not filter filters are being built covering 3 wells, correct? Okay.
Correct. And yes, there is a shortfall.
What are we projecting the gap to be?
fund balance, is that what that would be?
Yeah.
So that's, a total of 700,000, 750?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
$750,000.
And that's just the additional from this project.
From
right?
when the grant application
Yeah,
fund
applies
when it
and-
went in to where we're projecting at
For the
the time that
project,
at
yeah.
the time that it's gonna be built.
Yep, yep.
Bringing it back to sewer, just so I don't miss anything. We talked about the I&I program. You can see evaluating I&I removal to date was on there, so we were thinking about that already, planning for the next steps. And then as far as looking more for growth potential and planning for that is updating there's a hydraulic model of the sewer collection system for the city that hasn't been updated in a number of years. With new growth, you want to make sure that you're planning things that can handle not just that particular development, but also other growth that might happen in that region that's within your priority funding area. So having a model to evaluate those what ifs is really valuable. So getting that up to date and analyzing a few scenarios of, does it make sense to put a pump station here, or does it make sense instead to build a sewer conveyance line to get flow to the plant? Those are the kind of things it can be used for. That's what I had on the sewer side. Is there any other questions there before I jump to water? On the water side, we've talked about some of this already. We talked about the water loss early on. So if you look historically, water loss was a major problem with the city. I realize I don't have more recent numbers here, but the trend has stayed relatively steady for the last few years. But the streetscape project and replacements on older sections of the town have really had dramatic impact on the water loss, which you could see was over, approaching 30% of the water that was pumped out of the wells, treated, never made it to a customer's water meter. That now it's half of that, which is great, and that's capacity that is now available for growth and for use by the residents, and you're saving money because you're not treating water that is being leaked. So one interesting note there is that on the bottom, pumped flow in 2009 was 504,000 gallons per day, and 15 years later, it was only 457,000.
And that's even with the new development.
And a lot of development happened in between that period of time. That's when Carol Vista was built. A lot of build out in Meadowbrook.
I was gonna say, you still had Meadowbrook
Needs-
still building out, yeah.
There was a lot of development in between there, and you saw flows come down. And some of that is also new water fixtures, and generally, utilities across the country are seeing
Higher efficiency.
higher efficiency water use coming down by gallons per person.
Is that trend holding for the past 5 years? It's a little bit old, but
Yeah, I should have pulled more. Do you recall your water loss numbers for the last couple of years? We haven't been as involved. You've been doing that.
I think this year we're probably gonna be on the higher end, right? Because we had some pretty significant leaks this year.
Yeah, and this is, with this water loss, a lot of that we calculate in what we know was lost. So if we have a water leak, and again, we estimate what we lost.
Yeah.
So some of those numbers here recently, we were estimating low on the amount, but we're now starting to look at the pumps day to day. We were looking at pumps day to day, but now instead of just saying, hey, we did a water leak and we lost this many thousand gallons, we're actually looking at the pumps that next day and saying, okay, from this day to this day to the next day,
You can actively see how hard.
we'll say, okay, when we see these numbers match, we'll say, okay, we can take that amount off and say, this is what we actually lost at that leak. So we're in the, probably around the 10, I can safely say between 10 and 15%.
That's still pretty good.
That
That's
is
like
very
Yeah,
average.
it is still good
Very good.
percent-wise.
Yeah.
And the leak detection system, we're reading that twice a week now. So, and I would say on Monday, we actually had a leak found on Carnival Drive up at the house. So got a hold of the property
Nice.
owner and said, it was a property owner, their tenant was not at home at the time, but we shut it off and told the property owner, you need to get this fixed, because it was actually infringing on their neighbors in the townhomes where their property was saturated to the point you couldn't step in the yard. And tenant gets home and they're calling us and said, you need to talk to your landlord, and they're supposed to be getting somebody up here to fix it, but that is water that we stop from just losing and not accounting for.
Okay, this is an example project that you're very aware of. Construction is starting very shortly, but it's the most recent in the water main replacement projects. So it's on Memorial Drive. That project should start construction later. It was planned for March, as it says there, but it was actually, we're going to start.
I just want a quick answer on this, just because it's popping into my mind. I know we're doing the Memorial Park expansion, and we've had the sidewalk stuff on the issue. When they redo this, is this where they were running that sidewalk as part of the Memorial Park expansion?
No.
Okay, okay. I might be misremembering something.
That's going like on the other side, isn't it? Like way
I
down.
thought, is it by Park Road then?
Yeah,
The
it's on the other side of
sidewalk that's
Park Road, I
been
thought.
the point of contention for the Memorial Park project and the State Highway Administration is actually along Frederick Street, where the new access point to
Okay,
Memorial Park
okay.
will be.
Okay.
I was
So
thinking it was on the other side
just
of Park Road.
just south of the St. Joe's graveyard is a strip of property that connects to Memorial Park that the city owns, and there will be a new access point there, and there will be a sidewalk between that new access point
And all
and
the
the
way
church.
and
On
the
that one
church.
real quick.
Okay.
Small question.
Yeah, sure.
Since I sit next to two firefighters on planning committee and I hear about the fire stuff all the time,
We brought this up last time.
yeah, what's the impact on the carnival gonna be with this construction?
Construction March, August.
We talked to the contractor about that, and we're very clear that they can't work that week, so.
They're gonna be working outside of that area. We told them that anywhere inside that.
My ask would
carnival-
be, start back or something,
Well,
away from it.
And the reality is the project, I mean, you can see that yellow highlighted area, that was the original project area. We learned through some test pitting using the city's vac truck that the conditions weren't what we expected. So the project really is not as much a water main replacement as it is service line replacement and removal of the old parallel asbestos transite line that's adjacent to the current ductile line. So it's more getting older lines off the system that are subject to leak rather than actually replacing it, because in fact we found that there already was a ductile iron main.
So I do remember one issue with Broad Street, and again, I know with the back truck that you guys have you done a couple samples to make sure we're not gonna run into, I think Broad Street had a problem where we encountered more rock and stone than we anticipated when doing the project, did we not? And that increased
Because of how
contractor
deep,
costs, yeah.
because of how deep the sewer was going, yes,
Okay.
we hit a lot of rock. On this one, as Brian said, this is gonna be more, service line replacement, so we're gonna be shallow.
And this fixes there was like a double
We're getting
line,
rid of
right?
that
Yeah.
second line.
Okay.
Why we have a double line there is a mystery. So we're getting rid of that second line that we have.
They're
issues
both
with.
functional?
Right, they were both
They are
functional,
both
yeah.
operational, and at the pump house, where Pump House Road comes down to Memorial Drive, they actually tie in together. So when we have a leak on that, trying to find how many valves you have to shut off to get both lines to stop is.
I wonder if they had a plan back
So the
then.
services are being moved to the newer line, so that we can abandon the old
The
one.
old one, yeah. Do we tear out the old one or anything like that, or just leave it, let it go?
We're only tearing it out where we have to.
Okay. Okay.
There's
Yeah.
also
Okay.
disposal, it's
But yeah, I
transite.
know, we brought that up last
Yeah,
year. so
yeah, I was gonna
just
say,
be-
I
just be
I
very
I
aware of
had
the
to ask
carnival.
just because,
No, we are,
because my
Actually,
friends.
One thing I will say is Carnival is earlier this year, isn't it? It's,
The second week of June.
Yeah,
we
yeah,
gave them the dates.
okay.
And we told them that, because we're starting, I think, the second week of May, and the
Okay.
contractor's thought is to be between May, when he starts in May to June 1st, be in that area and out, and have temporary black, coal patch in that it's
Yeah.
smooth for everybody to work, and then they can continue to work down in the grass area of the park, or further up the road, but be out of there before Carnival starts at night and make sure people are able to access the
Yeah,
Carnival
make sure
grounds
that,
during
make sure
the
that
day.
road is accessible, because again, they
Yes.
still gotta get all that stuff in there and whatnot.
Oh, no, it has been highly,
Okay. And again, I definitely, it's always tough.
I figured it probably was, but I had to ask just because
I can
even
already,
last night I was sitting next to the firemen, so.
All good.
no, we know how that'll be if it,
my grandfather and my dad both were firefighters down here, and paid firefighters in Baltimore County, so believe me. That is part of the deal, that this has to be open for them.
Okay,
Good.
I'm good.
Can you make sure they have a contact with whoever is running it, fire department wise for the carnival and whatnot, just to make sure there's a line of communication somewhere? Or again, as long as you have their number, whatever, just as long as there's a line of communication, so it doesn't break down
I
somewhere.
have direct communication with the chief,
Okay.
so. And Mr. Parker as well, so they both know, know how to get a hold of me.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so then from the water side of things, planning considerations, well allocation permits and recharge area, recharge area being a big topic right now. There's a deficit, so kind of picking up that planning concept, making sure that well allocations are appropriate for growth projections as resolving that recharge deficit that exists. Kevin mentioned well 11 being shut down, well 14 having some elevated PFAS values. So source redundancy is really important, especially in that light when things may have to be taken offline. Is there adequate redundancy on the well side of things? PFAS treatment, we talked about the grants, we talked about the threat to the source, water source, so considering that. Water storage is something we haven't talked about yet. So right as of now, there's 2 water storage tanks on the city system. It's been that way since the standpipe was built, I think in the early 90s, I believe.
Do you have any recommendations on that? Because I was looking at the master plan for Carroll County, and I'm like, what if we enter a drought? I don't want to have to deal with previous administrations where we had to do mandatory water reduction across the town. Do we have any ideas of what we need if we enter drought conditions?
There's been a plan for a third storage tank on the capital improvement plan
Yeah.
for a number of years.
How many thousands of gallons? Are we in the hundreds for that one, or do
Yes,
you?
yeah, 500.
Was that another
gallons.
standpipe as well?
I don't know if those decisions were made.
That hasn't
Yeah.
been made yet. Elevated water tower would be 150, the standpipe is 750,000 gallons it holds.
Total.
So
Okay.
total,
It's not
so-
all usable.
Yeah.
Why are the water tanks elevated like that?
Pressure.
Pressure.
Pressure, yes.
System is, pumped from the wells, and then the pressure that you see at the tap is from the elevated tanks. So that's why I said usable storage in the standpipe, because really once you get down below the,
Yeah, because part of it is for
portion.
pressure to.
How often do those have to be repainted, like the inside?
They just did the repaint on that.
I know they just did it, but
Since we've entered into the agreement with,
Southern corrosion.
Southern Corrosion, yes, thank you, Jim. I think they come in and they assess them every year, which, up until they were just painted here in the last 5 years, that was the first time, I've been here 26 years, that was the first time they've been painted, and even when I was a kid, I don't ever remember them being painted.
yeah, I know they're not painted very often. I was just.
I think I know what Rachel's getting at. She would like to see a
No.
Jim W's face painted onto it. I am fully in support of such an idea.
But
Only
I
if
think
it's the bearded one.
With our scope with Southern Corrosions, I think it's every 9 years is where they will be, but they're being pressure washed every year to be inspected on the outside, and then every 9 years, I think, a coating on the outside, and every 5 to 6, they're draining the tank completely and doing
To
a
do the
inside inspection. Now, they do inside inspections every year,
They don't
but
get to
they don't
scoop it
have
They
out.
to
dive.
do
Do
the
they dive in
recoating.
there for that?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, that was mainly just me being curious. Not,
I remember we had something relatively recently with the standpipe where the standpipe's actually working a lot more efficiently now.
Yes, there was a,
We changed the board or something,
the
right?
altitude valve was removed because we found while we were servicing that and bringing it and getting it repainted, it was determined that the altitude valve was not working properly.
It's actually more of a hindrance than a help, right, or something?
It was not letting the water back out. It was pumping in and it was coming out at a very slow pace. And it really wasn't giving you the pressure it should have to the system.
Also, mixer too is the other thing that's in there, right?
We went from a bubbler and air circulated to a mixer where it is constantly stirring that water so it does not get, you blend it better and you're not getting a pocket of water that stays stagnant in there.
Sheer curiosity question. I think it was last year, the pipe on the side of the tower started spewing water. Was
The
that?
one up, all the way up the top that had the little spout out,
Yeah.
that was when it would overflow.
Or
Yeah,
like
okay.
almost like a relief?
Yes.
Okay.
And it shoots almost the Food Lions parking lot, yes.
Yes.
That actually has been removed now. It comes down one of the legs and
And goes out the side?
discharges on the ground.
That's good.
Okay.
So it's not a.
Wait,
it's
you didn't
not
want
a-
to see kids play in the little free waterfall?
Hey,
Timmy would
it's
might
a-
love
that.
It's the splash pad right
I
there.
think that was a 4-inch pipe coming out of there and
Yeah.
that distance down to the ground. I think that would hurt.
That
Yeah,
would
no,
hurt
it'd
a
be
lot.
painful water.
Put a nice little umbrella up where it
It's a
goes.
running
and
joke with
again,
this
you got a
Timmy
splash pad.
Oh, I know.
Kid.
Oh, yeah.
I got you.
Before we move away from the storage vessels, just to the question about drought, when we're talking about an additional storage vessel, we're talking about storage equivalent for days of use, not to get us through a drought period. So this would not really have an impact if we do.
On the drought condition.
And we're still, Maryland, much of Maryland is still in moderate drought condition. And, so it still is, may behoove us to put water restrictions on just because we are so reliant on groundwater.
Do we
that,
have any other solutions? We seem
we
to
can't really
fluctuate.
store enough water to.
It's more of a regional problem. It's an aquifer problem, not just an us problem. That's kind of the thing. Is it isn't just us. It's pretty much everybody in the region is facing the same kind of drought conditions.
Last month's WRCC meeting, Carroll County is going to be putting restrictions on because of their water for what they share with Baltimore County, Baltimore City, Baltimore County. The reservoirs are low. So they've already been told by those two jurisdictions that you have to restrict water already.
I thought the our aquifer was the one that was.
Ours is different. Yeah,
It's
he's
a
talking.
different one.
Yeah,
He's
but I'm
talking
just saying,
Westminster
like,
and the
water
Carroll County.
usage,
They're doing.
it is, everybody is fighting the same battle, as you
With the-
said,
yeah.
Mayor, that, we're all in that same boat. We're getting groundwater, they're getting surface water, so, but we're all fighting that same battle.
That's why it would behoove the council to consider the water wars that are imminent.
Stop. As long as we get the Pocomoke otters, I'm okay.
Eventually.
I thought you controlled the weather, so make it rain, Chris.
Well, actually, I'm gonna have to shut off the rain for Saturday for
I mean,
the
that's
cleanup
pretty
event,
that's
so-
pretty similar to Texas because a lot of Texas towns are groundwater, and with droughts it gets hot. So yeah, there's a lot of droughts. I mean, it's pretty
Because
similar.
I can say currently, during the week, our wells are running Monday through Friday, roughly 12 to 13 hours a day.
Hopefully
to
this
keep
weekend
us
we
at-
can pump it
On the-
up a
and
little bit.
now Saturday, Sundays, we're turning into 18 to almost 20 hours a day. So I know we've had the
And we haven't
discussion.
even really picked up to sprinkler season yet. So.
I know, but it's just,
I know.
it's just,
It's
just
getting
bringing that
hotter.
up to the council that, yes, we see, we're trying to make sure businesses are using water wisely. But I can show a trend where during the week, when businesses are really firing off here, our wells aren't pumping as much as they are on the 2 days on the weekend when people are home, which, again, people are at home, they're gonna use water. Just be,
But once again, wouldn't the water storage solve that problem with it being 2 days and you can, instead of having 12 consistently, you could have maybe 13 consistently
No, because
pumping?
we still have a maximum we can even pump from the wells. So that, again, no matter
Is that
what.
permitted by the
Yeah,
state?
no matter what, you're permitted at a cap. And
with that, putting that third tank on, you're saying you would lower the amount of time you're pumping? You're actually gonna increase the amount of time you're pumping.
you're
because
increasing
You're having to pump all 3 tanks up to the same level.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
then you
so
would
you're adding
equalize lower need, you would be able to maybe pump less and let the water level lower on the weekends to offset the
yeah,
It's
weekend
really
use.
the sizing on
and,
those
and
tanks.
it's not that we're gonna run out of
Oh,
water.
it's really
'cause-
just for pressure and consistency, then it
Like
is.
diurnal,
Yeah,
diurnal
yeah.
flow, like the.
Ah, so
times
it's
a
not
day, but also
reservoir-y.
The big reason that most of the volume is there for firefighting.
And-
It's for it.
And I think that's kind of, it kind of goes back to that. It's not that necessarily the drought condition is causing that we're gonna just run out of water. Like, no matter how many tanks, no matter how much storage you do, that isn't the problem. It's gonna come when we actually have to refill all that water and use it again, we're going to hit a permit cap of how much we can even drain from our wells to begin with. Again, there's only so much we can take from it. So that's the main problem with the drought. Nobody's running out of water, the next day or anything.
Our biggest and best well right now is well 17, and we're only permitted to take 19,100 gallons a day from it.
And what could we have taken if there was no limit?
Well,
Right, if we go to the maximum amount for the highest month of use, almost 260,000 gallons.
Oh, yes.
So I mean,
Okay, got
we are,
That's what I
we are
mean.
restricted, so
Yeah,
if we
I
can
gotcha.
find recharge land that we can increase it,
That's more of the
first bullet.
solution.
That's the
and
first
again,
bullet.
that's the thing is we're not,
we have it, it's
we
just
have
we
the
can't
water,
use
we
it.
just can't use it per the state. I mean,
It is,
the
it
state
is there, so we,
cuffs us on that.
when people say, hey, we're in a water deficit, we have the water, it's just what are we allowed to
Yep,
do
what
by
we're
state?
allowed to take essentially
requirements. It is
out of the
not.
aquifer, but.
It is
All
there,
that said, conservation measures during drought conditions are still
requested.
prudent.
Conserve water, people.
For sprinkler, Harry.
Quit with your 3-hour showers twice a day. Yeah.
I pay good money for that water.
Okay, similarly, on the modeling side, there's a hydraulic model for the water distribution system. That's, could use an update for recent water replacement projects and developments that have happened. And again, you can use that to evaluate different upgrade scenarios, particularly around developments, sizing of piping to serve new developments, things like that. And then there's the ongoing lead service line replacement program.
How much lead service lines are there still? Like, I know y'all sent
Well,
out
that's what
the
we did, the
survey.
the survey identification.
I don't know if that ever, I mean, I'm sure
Then again,
not
that doesn't e-
everybody
I have
answered
a
the survey.
stack of papers where people have not
Yeah.
certified, because the state originally said, just fill out this information, send it in. Then they changed their pattern and said, oh, now we need pictures of your pipes.
Well, are they providing anything to help the change out? I can't remember what that was. Or is it just identification, or
Right
they
now,
actually
we're doing
assisting?
identification, but we have so many years to get it replaced, and
Okay.
I think there are grants available
try to-
to
yeah,
help
people to do
with
it.
that. We've been out in the past 2 weeks with a hydro excavator, and I have a list of, I think, we did about 20 houses already that I have inputted into the system that the pictures are uploaded. I think I have another 40 of them to do. And we're going back out, from what I was told by our staff at the shop, they are going back out tomorrow. They have Tawny Drive that they're gonna be working on. And we're getting the ones that we can really go through fast, that are in grass areas that we can hydro excavate and see, and trying to not dig up asphalt or sidewalks right now.
I was just curious.
We are gonna eventually be digging up people's sidewalks and being able, because we're going after unknowns on resident side and unknown on our side.
Because is this from people that haven't answered like the survey that was sent out, I assume?
Or they answered it and they never sent pictures in.
Oh, okay,
And we
okay.
sent out that second survey asking for pictures, and people said, we already did this, and they
Okay.
file 13 the paper, so we're catching up with our stuff. And we're working with a different Aero Engineering on that side, and
Because I'm assuming once you've sent to the state that, hey, yeah, I assume they want the pictures. It isn't like yeah, you may give them to us, we're gonna come get the pictures.
we are getting pictures on both sides, and we're working with, right now, setting up a program that we send in the information to the state, where we're requesting that if we have a street of 20 houses on that street, we're trying to get the program where we can get survey 20% of those 20 houses, and if that 20% are all coming up copper lines on both sides and none of them are lead, we can assume the rest of that street is copper lines, and we do not have to dig them all. So we're working on that right now. But we're catching everything we can ahead of that and trying to knock that number down, so when they give us the go-ahead for 20%, we're already well past that.
Okay.
Most of those lines
You
are,
would think houses would be on top of it, because that's like blue baby syndrome. That's like, oh,
and
there's
most
a
of
lot of
those,
bad stuff.
most of the service lines we're having to inspect are in areas of the downtown, the older sections of town. The newer developments are copper
Yeah.
already, so. We're working on George Street, Middle Street projects where we're gonna be replacing water service lines. So we're gonna catch a lot of the old section that way.
Okay, that's what I had as far as system background and where we were. Any other? If anything else comes up, I'll send you this, but there's my contact information. Or I can put it back. Jot that down.
Yeah, if you can just send the slides out to council.
Yep. And I sent them out to you right before
here
the
it
meeting
is.
They
started.
already sent out.
Oh, they were sent, great.
Fun part.
Well, if nobody has any questions right now for Brian, we'll jump in. Just wanted to touch briefly on the capital improvement program. So we hope to have an FY27 proposal
With
for
the
you
budget.
in May. Kind of putting the final touches on it right now. But just to touch on a few of the projects that we're looking at for the coming year. See, we already talked about the Memorial Drive water main, turns out to be more service line replacement, since we learned that the ductile iron line that's there runs the whole length, so we don't need to actually replace anything other than the laterals. So that's already been awarded. We do have the well 11 and 12 filtration, as well as filtration for all 14 for the PFAS. So those are all scheduled for this year. One's already awarded, as you know. But we also had targeted George Street and Middle Street to do basically a reconstruction as we did on Roberts Mill Road and Broad Street several years ago. So that would be a water project as well as a sewer project. So on George Street, we have 1,750 feet of 6-inch cast iron pipe, and it's going to be replaced with 8-inch ductile iron pipe. On Middle Street, it's 1,055 linear feet. Again, cast iron would be replacing with ductile iron. And then on the sewer side, linear feet, very similar, but again, it's replacing, getting rid of that terracotta pipe or lining it. So, and we touched on this a little bit earlier, but with these projects, we line it wherever we can with the cured in place pipe, so it's a structural fix. But there are areas also where either there's something that's protruding into the line that we can't get past, or there's a sag in the pipe that would create problems even if we did line it. So it's usually a combination of dig and replace where the pipe is not, I'll say, eligible to be relined. So we reline typically as much as we can for the wastewater stuff for the sewer conveyance, and then dig and replace where necessary. So going into that, the lines will be cleaned and televised, unless, I don't think we've done that for those yet, have we? For George and Middle?
They were televised
Were they?
a while ago, yeah.
Okay,
They would need to
okay.
be, before you
They
line
would
it,
need to
you
be
do it again.
retelevised.
Okay, so we'd probably have to clean them again, but, so, and that televising also informed how bad the damage was and such. So, but that'll also go into the design for where we need to dig and replace and where we can reline. So anyhow, those are projects that we've got slated right now for the coming fiscal year. And
Jim, can I just interrupt
yeah.
you for 1 second? On the water side, there are technologies available similarly to do the water rehab without digging and replacing. There's cleaning and lining technologies where you can kind of bore out all the tuberculated material inside the cast iron pipe and line it with an epoxy liner. Again, it's much less intrusion and much less digging, less expensive.
And I think that's kind of what I was getting at earlier, is that one where yeah.
It's an option. Now these are 6-inch lines, so you'd have to, again, live with the 6-inch as opposed to kind of common standard now is 8. But it's not like in an area that is, you've got a lot of parallel lines kind of running down those streets there, so it wouldn't necessarily necessarily be a flow restriction.
Yeah.
So I don't know, just something that we didn't
And do the-
necessarily consider when we put the CIP together, but I think is something that you might want to.
Does that come out, I'm assuming that comes out cheaper because you're not tearing everything up, right? I think the only thing is with that, Middle and George Street, is that also, I mean, it needs a good repaving, I'm pretty
Exactly.
sure.
That's
is
where
the-
you would,
Right.
if you're going to repave it, that's
Yeah.
not really saving anything. So there's some evaluation there to be done.
Yep.
A lot of the reason why we are going to 8 inches for fire flow, for when
Yeah.
they're out there, those hydrants, something happens on that street, they tie into the one hydrant, 6-inch main is restricting what they can actually get to the fire.
That's right. Pros and cons, for sure. Oh,
Dampen that for what we have, checking for water leaks.
Was there any more, going back to the CFP?
So that's just a quick summary of what we have queued up for this
Yeah.
coming year. We haven't worked the capital figures into the capital part of this year's or next year's budget. So that'll be all before you next month.
Is there a way to get, this is kind of where I was hoping we were getting for some of this for tonight, to look at rates and things, but is there a way to get projected capital projects over the next few years so we know kind of where we're going?
Yes, that will be in the capital improvement program.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
the
so that
capital
we
improvement
That is a
program
six-year-
isn't just this year,
six-year
it's
okay,
it's forward
so,
out.
well, but you said some things have been in there for many
Yeah,
years,
yeah.
so
again-
like, do we know what the actual
And
projected?
we tend to shift projects around and they do get kind of kicked down the road based on the projected cost and what we think we can absorb.
Projected
We've-
costs, grants that come in.
right, and we've
any
had-
other thing that might pop up if there's a bigger issue that happens before and we end up having to do something anyways.
Exactly. and
Robertsville
that-
Road, we
and
did
that
not do
has-
that till ARPA came in.
Yeah.
Because we would get one
Well,
of the
we-
three
right.
phases, we would get a grant award for, and they said, you don't qualify for the other two, so we're like, we don't have the funding right now. So that got kicked down the road
And we had-
probably
right.
8-9 years.
And we had also shifted a while back under the previous city manager to, more of a strategy of trying to save up and, save to do projects once we accumulated enough to, minimize what we might have to borrow. And I think we had finally kind of gotten to that point with the Roberts Mill Road project where, and as Kevin said, we've been applying for, water, sewer, and stormwater, and one year we'd get one, next year we got we'd get water one year, sewer one year.
But the previous one will be gone.
Or, but we could never rank high enough for all of them to get them all funded. And eventually we just pulled the trigger to do it.
And I'm gonna say
And
that's the hard
concurrent
part.
with the ARPA part, then the ARPA money came in, and we had a very accelerated few years
Yeah.
of doing,
The big
we
projects.
had to spend it down, very quickly. I mean, it came in, I don't know if it was late 2020 or 2021,
It was
Was it
22.
22. So, and it had to all be encumbered, that is under contract by the end of last year. So that's,
Yeah,
so
or,
that
or
was
they
a
took
lot
it, or
of-
they took it back.
that was a lot of kind of heavy lift to engineer, bid,
plan it all out,
construct, and do those projects to be able to take advantage of that that funding opportunity. But that was a rare windfall for us. So at this point, we'll probably slow the rate of the projects down just because of the cost.
Yeah.
And
Well, and again, it's really hard to budget those capital improvement projects because it's the exact same thing as when's a grant going to come in? When's the additional state funding going to come in? When's the next federal, slate of infrastructure stuff coming in? So again, while you can try to budget for it as much as you can, there's the infrastructure. I always take it as you see random windfalls, and it's good that you see the random windfalls, but it really throws off your projections. So again, it's a harder thing to budget around, and that's kind of what me and you have been talking about is how do we budget to still put money back? But my thing is make sure it's not an excessive amount with those windfalls that come in. And again, you can never have an excessive amount, I know, but you don't want rates to be so high for something that you also do see the windfalls on, is my only take on it.
And the last thing I wanted to touch on as far as capital projects under the water projects, we have, well 13 has been taken offline, but many years ago there was PCE contamination and filtration was put on the well, and that filtration was limited as to how much we could pump through it, and also the Department of the Environment was involved in, and I suppose those pumping numbers were also to manage the plume of contamination. At any rate, we also have some naturally occurring, basically radon contamination, radionucleotides, I believe it is, that is a more expensive correction or filtration. And then you have a hazardous material to dispose of with the filtration. So we have taken that well offline. However, the ESOB Corporation that used to operate off Allendale Lane they never admitted guilt to the contamination, but they paid for the original filtration system. And we have been in talks with them recently about coming to essentially they would be obligated to continue
The corrective
paying
action.
to replace the filtration, every time it would need to be changed out and so on. They are aware that we're not using the well currently, but we do still hold a permit for it. So we're in talks with them right now to try to broker a deal to take 13 out of the picture and not renew a permit for it, and reach a final settlement with the ESOB Corporation. So in FY28, we're targeting demolition of well 13 in hopes that we'll be able to reach some agreement with folks on the ESOB end, and they'll make some contribution towards that project, and also towards us being able to start work on a replacement source. So if you hear us talking about well 13, just wanted to give you a little background on that. So,
And just talking on
and
capital
and
improvements again.
that's on for FY28, hopefully.
On capital improvements again, my only concern as well is, making sure we don't wind down all of the money that's there for the grant opportunities that do come up where we have to put, again, a certain amount in or whatever. So again, it's that fine balance of what we're putting in and what we're taking out, and not accelerating projects that could potentially put us in a worse position if something better comes up.
And we have struggled, I think, also. Oh, and Brian had mentioned a new water storage vessel, and that perspective, would be for FY29 possibly. But that's a pretty hefty one too. But some of our challenges as far as funding is that oftentimes a project needs to be farther along in the design process, and we tend not to design the projects until we're pretty well sure that we're going to build it. So when there are often, well, I won't say often, there are sometimes opportunities for grant funding for things that are shovel ready, so to speak, or
That's
that
how some of the park ones
that
are
have
as well.
like, planning approval and things like that. And, that our ability to secure grants may improve if we invest in some of the design earlier, but then we do run the risk of spending money for design, and then it sits on the shelf for years and may no longer meet current codes or something by the time we go to build it. So it's kind of a balancing act, and I don't know if we've hit the sweet spot in the way the city's been doing it in past years or not. So just kind of food for thought. And
Any sense of how many grants we've lost the opportunity to secure because of this particular issue?
trying to think of a specific opportunity. I'm
There's
drawing a
just
blank
there's
on one,
windows
but-
that open up, and we get the emails on them, and what it'll say is, hey, you have 2 months to submit, but again, it's got to be something that's already in a planning or design phase,
Right.
and you're ready to hit the shovel, if we gave you the money. Again, it's hard to say a project's been missed because of it, because again, we don't have any that are actively in that queue, right, the part of design and whatever, but we do get regular emails, I'll say, that it's like, hey, if you have a design-ready project, please submit, money's come in. And again, it's those random windfalls. The state gets them, the county gets them, the feds get them.
Right, I'm just trying to figure out, like, is this something that happens more frequently? Is there
I think it
like a
happens
once-a-year
regularly.
thing? Is it?
It's a couple times a year.
Yeah.
And, I think to be, and
It's really hard to hit
It-
sometimes,
it's-
though.
and partly, our size, I suppose, but if we had the wherewithal to design all of these things, years ahead and, have certain levels of approval and, resolutions of support ready to go, we would be able to apply for more than we do. So we often are limited to things through the state revolving loan program and through Department of the Environment, and but there are other opportunities, but we typically aren't able to
Capitalize on it.
take advantage of them because the application window is so short that
Yeah. There's
can't-
no way we
can't
could
get a
accelerate it.
design
Yeah.
done, and of course, we only meet and have business meetings once a month. So if we are supposed to have a design that's already been approved by all the authorities,
And you still have planning and zoning, you
and,
still have.
and it's due in 60 days, we're just not going to meet that. So we miss opportunities.
And I will say, we can try to be more aggressive in that as well, if council's open to, again, that email of me shooting out, hey, we need an extra meeting this month. I'm willing to entertain that, to be more aggressive in it.
I think the big piece, though, would be
But again,
designing,
trying to get more in the
getting
process,
them
yeah.
farther into the
Do you know
process.
how much money we've been talking about? Like, I mean, is it beneficial to pay to have the designed, and how much money was out there that we?
It's hard because you're still talking about, a lottery of who gets a lot of these as well. So again, even if we designed it, it still goes into the lottery, and then we could still get the no. And again, I'm going to tell you, a lot of these, again, it'll be like, hey, if you have a design ready process, it has to meet this scope, and some of the scopes sometimes can be rather limited. Again, there's times we don't have projects that necessarily fit that. So it's also hard because if we do the design right, there's
Are
a
these
chance
costs significant to
try to get-
design or to
design.
get it there? Like how? I
Under-
think that's what you're trying to get, and then that's where I was going to go too. Like, how much money are we generally talking to get something where it's like shovel ready?
How much was the building for just the design when we did the building, right? That's our most recent one where we had the design started to put together
Or
for the DPW building.
That was done
Oh.
by the Morton Building. That was not.
No. I'm just
Yeah.
saying like how much is the cost of a design essentially?
I think to put some of these together, these values together, we estimated the construction costs, and then we added on project costs. And if I remember correctly, I don't have it in front of me, we used a 10% figure to estimate preliminary and final design costs. So
10% of the project essentially.
10% of the construction cost
Okay.
would be the design cost. So what you see is a summation of the construction cost, the design cost. There was a couple percent for permitting, and then the design phase engineering.
Yeah.
So I don't know. You could probably look at like.
You have $10
7,
million
8,
in projects.
7,
You're
8% of
looking at
this.
$1 million in design costs.
Probably look at 7-8% of what's.
I'll say actually a good point of data we might be able to look at is, again, we can go back through some of those emails and see what the scope of some of those projects were, try to see projects as far as that might have fit in that, and again, what the benefit would have been.
and we can certainly provide, for some of these utility projects, we have what we've paid CDM Smith to do the design work on, things like Roberts Mill and Broad Street, Westview, Memorial, they're certainly dramatically different projects from each other, but to give you a feel for, the
Average
cost
cost
of
from the,
this.
from the
And
construction.
we've certainly had designs that have been over 6 figures, just for the design and the construction services that usually go along with that. So, you want your design engineer involved during the construction process also, as well as, having your inspector in the field to
Wasn't
make sure
there-
that everything's being built per the design and specifications, and that the billing is representative of the portion complete for everything. So
I think we've talked about this before. Is there there a problem with the process where something can only linger for so many days in a certain point of the, like, planning and zoning queue, for instance? Like, if we had a project that had to go through them and it sat in the queue, doesn't it leave the queue after so many?
Typically,
But I can't remember if we were counting
with our-
that towards city
With our planning
projects.
cycle, typically not. Usually, we will leave it in the queue until somebody formally withdraws something. Now,
But I thought our
if there's-
plans that we submitted, for instance, would be,
I mean, we have had challenges with plans getting stuck in the design phase, in the review and approval phase. You know, particularly when we've been working at, the wastewater treatment plant is in the county. So anything we do there is subject to a
Their
county
process.
site plan review. And we've certainly had challenges in getting plans through the county process before. And you know, Memorial Park is probably not a
Yeah,
great, typical example because we've been struggling with some issues with state highway, and the project engineer on that, you know, project has really struggled with state highway as well. You know, but again, that was an unusual situation where the state contracted an engineering firm, I suppose, to do reviews of these projects. And one of their vendors reviewed the project, provided a short list of comments. Our design engineer met them, and then the State Highway Administration brought in a new review entity who had a whole new list of comments. So we ended up having to amend our contract with the engineer, and then it has just proven very difficult to get through the process with that new review agency. So that's not typical, but it is an example of, you know, we've had this project budgeted. Lorraine has secured a, you know, over $800,000 grant for the project, and the clock is ticking on that grant, and we
Yeah.
still don't have final plan approval. So there is some, you know, there certainly can be complications in the design phase.
and we bore a lot of extra costs because of all that.
Yes, yes, and yes, certainly if
I
we
mean,
do.
that's what it happens though,
Yeah.
but.
Now, most of these utility projects do not go before our planning commission. They don't really fall under a site plan process or a subdivision process or anything
Yeah,
like that.
but we still did like I don't know if it's required, but again, we did like the public like for Broad Street, for instance, I remember attending the public campaign there
But
of,
we,
you know, what's
yes,
happening
we
on
did,
the road
right,
and
we
whatnot,
held public meetings to inform everybody because we knew that was gonna be a major disruption for a lot of folks where their street was gonna be torn up, you know, for a relatively long period of time. And it turned out to be at least the Broad Street portion because of the deep sewer line and the rock that the contractor hit, turned out to be probably 3 times the time that it was expected to be. You know, once they got up to Roberts Mill Road, it moved at a much better pace. But yeah, that Broad Street was awful.
It was something.
Yeah.
Jim trying to sabotage me on Broad Street.
I'll just add on this topic of like design or shovel-ready design grants.
Yeah.
I would say it's pretty unusual to progress with a design kind of hoping for a grant opportunity to pop up. So,
yeah.
so I would say it's either, you know, you've planned for through a capital improvement plan, you've planned to spend the money, or you have loan money that is
Already lined up.
is lined up, and maybe or you have grant funding that you've, like Lorena's example, that you've lined up ahead of time so I would say it's.
And I don't think
I
that's
wouldn't-
not what the intent of these grants is. I'm gonna tell you guys that as well. That's not the intent of these grants. These grants are mainly to find people who do have projects that meet the scope that are in that process. So again, we're talking about trying to do something that is a little bit outside the box as far as grant secural goes, because it is mainly about trying to find projects that meet a scope that sometimes even the scope can be narrow. That's, you know, somebody found extra money somewhere and they're like, hey, you know, we're willing to windfall it down.
Well, but it
It's an
sounds
efficiency
like our
problem.
plan, though, on capital improvement projects is to wait until we can find a grant. That's what I'm hearing. So what,
And I would say in a different method.
Now, we can use funds that we have restricted for capital improvement program, for capital improvement projects. So we have restricted funds in the utility fund that have come from benefit assessment where, you know, a development pays as each house is built. They pay a fee, you know, a sewer benefit assessment fee and a water benefit assessment fee. And those monies are set aside. They're not part of the day-to-day operation. They're for typically things that increase capacity, like capital projects. A lot of these projects, you know, through reduction in I&I, for example, they are increasing our available capacity at the wastewater treatment plant through that I&I reduction. So that's our kind of our nexus to using some of those funds, although we did benefit from the ARPA funds for many of them. So we do have some funds available that we can tap for these projects, but it's not an unlimited resource. And those, with there being kind of a dead period now for growth, we're not seeing those funds for the benefit assessments coming in like we did with when Meadowbrook was being built and when Meads Crossing was being built. We collect $7,000 per house on sewer, well, $7,790 per house for sewer, and $5,110 per house on water. So with the new development, we're bringing funds in that we can use towards these capital projects. But we haven't been seeing that growth.
Aren't the impact fees in
so-
theory supposed to be to facilitate growth and not
And
necessarily
they can, it's
the older stuff,
to offset
right?
the impact that
That the
the
development
growth
has
is
had
having.
on our,
Right.
on our system.
So it can be, and, you know, the model, I guess maybe not the perfect model, but the model would be, you know, we spend money to develop capacity. The new homes were built, they use the capacity, they pay us back for what we spent to build that capacity.
Fund the belt filter press project.
Sorry, can you say that again? I couldn't hear you.
We used the restricted funding approved by council to fund the belt filter press project. That went on for several years. That was mentioned in his.
Okay, I mean, but it seems like we kind of need to plan these out a little. It's things that need to get done. The Old Town sewer stuff, it's got to get done. Okay, we've got pipes, we've got I&I issues, we've got pipes that are going to die. It needs to get done. A lot of these projects seem to fall under things that need to get done. So we need to be planning them out to get them done, whether we're able to find grants or not. I'm not holding out a lot of hope that the state's giving out a lot of grants right now.
I agree.
And I agree with that, but when you made the comment about it looks like we're waiting for grants to do these projects, there's the three things we're looking at: grant, reserves, or we're taking out loans, which is increasing our debt services we got to pay. So,
But it's all info that we need in order to be able to have a complete picture.
correct, but I mean,
You're
If-
just talking,
if we're not-
about
if-
sources of funding,
Yeah,
right?
if-
You have three sources of funding. You have your revenues, your operating revenues, debt, or grants, basically,
Yeah,
right? It's like,
and-
it has to come from
in
somewhere
my
to pay for
opinion,
the
I
thing.
don't want to take another loan out to
Yeah, no.
put, so we're looking for the grants, so we're not taking loans, or do we have, and again, we go back to rates, which I know we don't want to really talk too much about tonight, so where do we set that rate structure at that we aren't having a cash cow come in, that we are rolling in the money and able to do project after project, but we're bringing in enough to cover that every 2 or 3 years we
and
can
I'm
do a
gonna-
project.
yeah.
There's a sweet spot we have to find.
There is,
That's
and-
where we're not having to take loans, but we are bringing in enough money to pay our bill, our daily operation fees, and we're setting small chunks aside to cover projects in the future.
And we talked
That
about this
is
with
where we
last
find
year's, when last year's budget and the water rate was discussed, that, you know, this is that years that we do have a surplus, that's the money that goes towards these bigger projects. So the smaller the surplus, the longer we have to save up to be able to do these projects, and then the projects cost more. So, and I know we're not going to get into a big
well,
discussion on rates tonight, but
we'll talk a little bit about budget and rates, but again, I'm not going to go into the actual specific proposals tonight on it. Because again, I'll tell you, we are tweaking hard to try, or
yes.
tweaking the numbers hard to try to find the sweet spot. Because again, it does, obviously, I looked at the budget through and through to see what we could do, and again, I know me and you are going to have additional talks on that, but there is nothing else to cut in the budget. There is not. I have made all the cuts that are even possible, and again, we still have to talk about it. If they are all still possible. So I know.
It was brought to
That-
my
did they-
attention today
okay.
that you had went through it, so I appreciate that, hey, we're gonna sit down and
And
talk,
yeah,
because,
don't think it's final. We will sit down and talk on it, but
on paper, it looks good, but
well, that's what I'm gonna tell you is
meeting permits and
Yep.
making sure we're not
the,
violating,
the,
because
the
that's
cuts
the last
that
thing I wanna
the
do.
cuts that we have done on permit, bringing that number down of what we have to achieve to cover debt service. However, it is not the optimal way to run. And again, me and you're gonna have to discuss that further and see if see what it comes to. But again, we're gonna continue molding that as we get into May.
Sounds good.
But again, my goal is to have those before council by the end of this month, so they have the first couple weeks of May to really look at it and consider what I'm proposing, because I'm probably going to propose a couple of different scenarios to council as far as what that looks like, and council's going to have to choose what their appetite is on it.
Well, best that I can come up with, that's what I've been kind of jotting stuff down here. Before we can make any kind of decision on rates, which we have to make in the next little bit, I figure we need at least these four things that I've come up with already. We need the figures on the projects with the dates desired, so be able to plan out a few years. Even if we don't get grants, these are the things that we've got to get done. Need to get current totals on utility fund, need to get the current totals of revenue versus expenditures on the water system just on its own, and water and sewer. And then we also need to get totals for any current debt service, so that we know what we're still up against.
And that's a good segue into Barry's portion of tonight.
Yeah.
So
But I was gonna say, but we can't really, I mean, everything would
and
be
again,
this is
oral
not going to
tonight,
answer
so-
everything.
This night is digest, questions.
Right.
And then you guys are I'm gonna try to get out either this week or the beginning of next week, some of the scenarios. If people need to digest that, ask questions on it, because there's gonna be some tough, people are gonna have to make tough choices in May.
Scoot over a little.
Dan, can I get a
We'll
little
get
bigger?
closer.
There is actually something I want consensus
Can
on.
we
tonight,
just
though.
get rid of the chart and make the numbers bigger? Is that possible? Yeah, there you go.
Well, but again, I mean, we
Thank you.
we need to do more than we're just looking at numbers tonight that we just are looking at. We need to be able to actually look at it and digest what needs to go on.
Barry, can
Well,
you summarize what's on the?
On this chart, I did a look back, and this chart is apples to apples. It was not necessarily how we came out for the year, and I'll explain a little further, but in fiscal year '23, our water and sewer revenues exceeded the water and the sewer expenses and the
debt
debt
service.
service principal, which is not show in your expense line, because it reduces a liability. And we were 44,000 to the good just from the water and sewer rates. There, FY '24, we had, with using these numbers, a deficit of 402,000, but not in this chart. We had bank interest of 395,000 because we had ARPA money sitting there and the bank rates were really, really jacked up during that time. So we were able to cover almost everything with bank interest, but we, and there were, this is money that comes in directly from the operation and goes directly to the operation or the payment of the bills. And then FY '25, we didn't do nearly as well because the expenses are going up because things are starting to cost more.
And we even did cuts in FY '25.
Huh?
We even did cuts in FY '25 to try to bring those numbers down.
Yeah,
know,
but in FY '25 too, it was a little bit mitigated because we did have 266,000 in bank interest, which is not on here, but that helped mitigate it. But we were still not quite covering all of the debt service, so, and during these years too, we were also using the ARPA money for the capital projects, so we weren't hemorrhaging
Yep,
money.
taken out of that.
Because that was, the ARPA money was being used. But this year, we're down 115,000, and we still have over 500,000 of debt service to pay, and this is through 3 full quarters. And bank interest is dropping like a rock, which is why it was just not comparable from year to year, so I left bank interest out of this. The only things making up this is the utility billing and the standpipe for the revenue, and then it's just the operating expenses without capital spending or depreciation. We're kind of not covering our expenses.
And I'm going to tell
It
you,
doesn't look like kind of, it looks like we're just not.
well, again, we're definitely not covering debt. We're definitely not covering debt service. I'm going to tell you the revenue on water and sewer does cover operating expenses on water and sewer. The biggest problem is the debt service. And again, the only way that that's going to continue to come down without hemorrhaging out of what we use to do our projects is to try to balance around it. So I'm going to tell you guys again, the number is 761. We have the number down to 330 right now after the cuts that have been done in the budget. But again,
That's for the FY '27.
yeah, that's for FY '27.
When we say when you say you're cutting stuff, what exactly are you cutting?
Everything, basically every line item in the budget receives some kind of cut. And again, that's why there's still going to be internal
What are the impacts of
discussions.
these cuts? Like what, that's what I'm trying to figure out. 'Cause like,
Our guys are going to have to try to manage on less. I mean, that's what the cuts do. The guys have to try to manage on less. The biggest problem is the chemicals. And again, it's not to, we have to hit permit no matter what. I mean, that is our goal. That is the, and again, that's why we have to have additional conversations.
'Cause
But
like I said, paper cuts are fine, but
Yep.
to make permit, if we have to spend to buy the chemicals, we have to spend to buy the chemicals. Because the last thing we want to do is come back here in front of you and say, we got to deal with $100,000 fine because we didn't make permit again. Then you're going to have to answer to the residents.
yeah,
Oh, we now have to take money out of our coffers to pay a fine that we could have avoided.
and again, one thing I will say, and it's going to be part of what I talk to council on, is my ask to council is going to be, again, the willingness for budget amendments if it turns out we have to adjust. But I will tell you, the cuts bring us closer in line with where we need to be covering debt service. And again, I'm going to tell you, they're tough cuts to make. We spent, 2-3 hours sitting there going line by line, trying to figure out what could move, what could shift, looking over the previous years. And again, it's not something I want to do, but I'm going to tell you, if we try to bring revenues up to to cover that full debt service, it is a pretty big number. So part of what I'm going to ask council today is whether council would even entertain a budget that isn't completely balanced with debt service. And if council says no, then that gives me what I know I need to do budget-wise.
I don't want to propose anything. I just want to make sure I understand what I'm looking at. So from a simplistic point of view, and if we had a crystal ball almost a year ago, we actually, if we knew what we knew now and we didn't want to make a cut, we needed to raise rates about 15% rather than cut it by 5%. Is that what
About
I'm processing?
14%.
About 4. Okay, I'm rounding
Yeah.
here with my math, but I'm not saying anyone made the wrong decision. I'm just trying to make sure I
Well, again,
understand
it's the
how
same.
we got
It's the
here.
same thing I said last year. Again, the 5% cut isn't what brought us here. What has brought us here
I've been
is
aware of that for months.
yeah. Again, I think most of us were aware when we did the 5% cuts that this is where it was going to be. But the problem is that the expenses are going up. It is pushing more of debt service out of what we can use from the general revenue of the operating,
I
general
have
revenue.
to, go. I've had a,
Yeah,
Myra's got a
all good.
problem with her.
Have a good night. Yeah.
Do your thing, man.
Let's
Good luck
not
with
turn this
that.
up, Jim. But, yeah. But again, I'm gonna tell you, I know me and Nick, we had this conversation back then. I think we knew that, again, it doesn't, I'm gonna tell you, we knew it didn't help the problem. But I'm gonna tell you, the cut is not what has led to this, for instance. This is something that has continuously been building.
Well, but my question is where was this last year? When we were having this discussion? Because,
This is what we were talking
Talking about
about.
last
This is what I was saying that I wanted, because like, we didn't have any information to make these decisions, right? Like, we were making very vibes-based.
well, but
decisions.
we asked specific questions of, are we still going to be putting money away, or are we going to be in the negative? And we were assured that we were still going to be putting money away. So that's where I'm at the
I'm going to
moment.
have to go back and watch that meeting. That's not
I
my
asked the
recollection.
questions and
Well,
got the
and
answers,
I'm
so
gonna-
that's
I'm gonna
why
tell
I
you-
believe I sat here and cautioned
Yeah.
that
You said it wasn't a good idea,
did,
but when I
and I
asked you
told you you could tell
directly,
us
that's when you said we would be
Yeah,
in
I'm
the
gonna-
positive.
and we
the
will
answer-
get through.
Well, wasn't
We
that
will
because
get through.
Debt services wasn't calculated, now it's calculated into the line item, right?
Well, again, now
Rather
we're
than
trying to.
re-
break
rather
down
than
our-
rehashing the past, and I think everyone can look at things differently when they know what they know now back then. It sounds like, and just to make sure I understand, I'm not asking for any proposals, but you and Mayor and Jim, you guys have multiple scenarios to address this, and you're and trying to make sure you're giving us the best
Yep.
three. I'm not holding you to
Well,
number,
I'm
three
gonna-
solutions that we
I'm-
can digest.
I'm
later
probably
on.
going to give you guys about 4 of them.
Perfect.
And one's going to be basically a very sound resident protected one. One's going to be where it is spread out across the board. One's going to be that I'll call that balanced. I'm going to call one semi-balanced. So again, it starts leaning into residential. And then one I'm going to give you is going to be what it would be if we also wanted to try to put money back to do capital projects. Because those 3 are separate of a budget that wants to do capital projects. And again, it's not to say any of those 3 can't have extra revenue that goes in, but another budget that also does capital projects, that's an entirely different thing. Because again, it isn't as simple as 50,000 back a year. That'd take us decades. So again, I'm going to give 4 different scenarios, and my ask is to council to digest them, over the next couple of weeks. Ask comments, ask concerns, and again, it's how I have it is it's very easy to adjust the numbers and stuff. Currently, me and Jim, we wrestled through that today and got it all fixed up. But I'm going to ask that council entertain a tiered structure that also has a base fee. And again, I'm going to provide a couple different models on that. But I don't think, we definitely, and again, that's why I'm going to ask if there is consensus among council that they will not entertain a budget that does not balance debt service. Because if council says that, again, there will be no budget that doesn't entertain debt service. You know what I'm saying? Again, it won't, there is no,
I think we have to, if we care about sustainability in the model, you have to incorporate debt service into your revenues.
and I'm going to tell you, we balance, for instance, general fund is currently balanced with debt service in it. That's what we spent, the last weeks doing on that. But now, the big challenge is this water one, because the water is totally separate from the number that we saw that we were doing in general fund. But I would prefer to balance debt service this year.
I think you have
Between
to.
both-
and-
to.
and-
Between
It's not a desire, it's
Yeah.
a necessity.
Yeah, that's not, the other thing that I would say is, I think you do need to add a buffer, or include a buffer, because if you don't try and project some kind of a buffer accrual you risk not being able to have the money to do your capital improvement projects. So I think you have to do debt service plus some.
Like an
accrual,
inflationary protection essentially for.
Well, not just that. He's talking the capital projects that
Yeah.
we're
Well,
putting
no,
in.
I just make sure I'm understanding.
yeah, so when when you create the model, like you assume that your expenses are gonna increase.
Yeah, we're
You
talking
can
the
use-
same language.
Yeah, so like you assume that, but then also like, it's like, okay, well, I wanna accrue in today's dollars, 300,000, it doesn't matter the number, $100,000 a year of additional buffer
Your present value of those.
just for capital improvement,
Yeah.
and you increase that by inflation, right? So like
Yeah,
that's the
there's
math
a
that you
model
do.
for that calculation.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just got to be calculated.
I think you have to do that, otherwise, you're not sustainable just because you can't pay for debt service, but then two, you have no money for capital improvement. So, and then you're in the perpetual cycle of, we can only ever wait for grant money because there's just not money available to do whatever.
And again,
Also, at some point, like, we can't grow anymore because of a whole bunch of reasons, right? But I mean, basically, as we all know, we're circled by ag press, so we can't assume perpetual growth, so like, we can't assume these perpetual impact fees to pay for old crap. So.
And it's kind of the same thing. Eventually, yeah, you can't grow. So
Yeah, so like, we are in the unenviable position of, we have to make sure that we're planning for sustainability plus capital improvements.
And again, I'm going to tell you, this council is faced with the predicament that they have to make a decision to fix something that it's been a long time coming.
No, I mean, I'm not saying that this is the problem that we created, but it is a problem, and I know, for me, I would prefer not to kick this can down the road and screw over, future councils, future residents.
Yeah.
I would prefer not to do that.
I would just say, I can tell this council has made a focus on residents. What was the reason why you guys went back and did 5%, and now you guys are all open to data. I think collectively we'll be able to come to a good decision. It just may not be a decision we all want to make. It will be a necessity decision.
And again, I know when we talked about it, part of it was trying to provide a momentary relief as well. And again, that we talk about it more this year over what we did last year. I will say, just be aware, as we do try to budget principal and whatnot, that is only going to help our budget situation later years, because not only are we going to have less interest that we're paying out through the budget, but again, eventually it is coming down. And again, it's not coming down just because we're paying out of our utility fund. It's coming down because we're making payments out of revenue and our revenue lines out of utility. But again, there's going to be a couple different scenarios, but I'll let Barry, if you want to keep going into, did you have more as far as?
I just wanted to add that we were talking about a little bit over, and in the last couple of years too, like I said, we had a couple of really great years with the bank interest because we had the ARPA money sitting there and the rates were like 2.66%, and now they've dropped down to 1.21. So we're not, which is why I completely took bank interest out of that first thing, because it was not at all predictable or anything we could control. So, there are
Do we
little
not have any
win-
levers? That seems incredibly low, even in the ones. Like, do we not have any levers to be able to better utilize returns for buckets of
I
money?
was about to ask that.
I was like, that's terribly rates right there for us.
So the money that you get, is this all sitting in savings accounts, basically?
It's a savings account.
Like high
Are
yield
we,
or CDs?
are we allowed to move further out on the yield curve? Like,
Right.
are we allowed to create something similar to like an endowment fund, to where it's like, you're not just putting money in cash savings accounts or money markets, but like, you can put it in
We could have
broader index of
semi-liquid,
investment vehicles?
hyper-liquid funds.
You're talking stuff that's tougher to touch, essentially.
Sorry?
Stuff that's tougher to touch to extract from if we need to.
Well, potentially, so like, I
think it comes-
guess like an insurance company basically takes all their money and they put it in a whole slew of different investment
That's
vehicles.
private industry though. I think governments
Yeah.
are limited.
I know, that's what I'm
It has to do
asking.
with the
I
risk
don't know
profile.
And
what,
that's
do,
it's
yeah.
exactly the risk
I'm
profile.
trying to figure
because
out what
governments are
kind of
limited
risk
in the risk
profile we're
profile.
allowed to have, because obviously, savings accounts are like the lowest of the low on the risk profile. Like, are we allowed to move out so that we can increase our yield, or no?
I don't believe so. I'd
Okay.
have to check on that, but.
Okay.
Nick,
But
me and you
anyway,
can
I'm-
also do a lot of independent research, and we can see if we can move that at all, but, I mean,
Well,
that
if-
seems like an
but if it-
opportunity
if it-
for us
if
as a
it's-
town.
If it's mandated that you can't do it though, then it doesn't
Yeah,
matter.
it's a moot point
That's why I was
at that.
asking
Yeah,
the
yeah.
question.
Nick, read the bottom of this real quick. It doesn't have anything to pertain with this. It's just a message that, yes.
My phone's dead, or, but,
Maybe.
oh.
So, I was gonna say,
Emergency.
As part
possible
of our,
emergency issue, so.
ongoing budget discussions, the idea of our debt service and whether the total of principal and interest, has remained relatively level or if it's increased over recent years. So that's why Barry put this illustration together.
And again, pretty much the savings you're making in the interest paid is just shifting over to principal paid, because, yeah. So, while yes, interest paid is going down, it really just translates back over to principal paid of the loan. So I'm sure everybody.
The loss of 2 councilmen, do we want to try to streamline wrapping this up?
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
They're dropping like flies.
Yeah, I just read the message, and I'm like, yeah, he's gone. He's going to be leaving shortly.
Barry, do you have additional on this one? Do you have additional on this slide? For this slide, like additional comment for this slide?
Oh, no, it was just an illustration that we're paying the same amount, but just to show that some of it is what I call above the line, which is showing in our revenues and expenses on the reports, but the principal that we're paying only shows on the balance sheet. So you don't see that money going out, but it's going out.
Let's make sure we get slides over to council as well from
The
everything.
slides
tonight.
are already, we already have them.
Okay, just making sure. I don't think we have these
Not
ones.
these.
Not these, but we do.
You'll
have
get
the
them
other
too.
Yeah.
Okay. Was that it? Okay. So again, I think, just from, I want to make sure I don't propose a structure that council isn't even interested in. Is there anybody on council who is interested in a budget that doesn't completely cover debt service?
No.
Sounds good.
Oh, no.
And again, the reason I ask is because that saves me time from wasting on another example. So that is fine. We will prepare 4 different examples of 4 different rates of different scenarios. And again, we'll get information on the CIP stuff. We will wrap that up again into a budget that also accounts for what that would look like, trying to budget that. We'll do a resident-focused budget, a balanced and a semi-balanced budget as well. So I will
I
get.
can get any, just on one of them or 2 of them, what Jim would recommend, brief comments on why from a physical approach? Is that possible?
Yeah, I don't know if Jim's, I would probably ask the treasurer and,
Okay, perfect. Whoever from the city, just so we can get a physical
no offense,
view.
Jim, but.
No, well,
That's why I was asking you, not Jim,
Hey.
about Jim.
my methodology would probably be a little
Me-
simpler, but
me and his- me and-
the mayor is
me and Jim's
very
take is very
targeted on
different.
achieving certain goals and objectives, and as
Again,
long
I
as the
get that.
bottom line number gets us where we need to be,
Yep.
that's.
Again, I will tell you, the simpler is just to adjust our current system, but it does not, I will tell you, it is much cheaper than I have the appetite for. So, again, we'll prepare different models, and again, we'll also give a model of what the current system would look like if you wanted to do that as well, so. But I'm sure you basically said the number. It's 14 plus 5 is what you'd have to put across the board. That's just a break even.
Do we want to save the conversations for the next one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So
Motion
again,
to
that was system study. Next up is capital improvement planning. No. Looking for a motion of adjournment.
Motion of adjournment.
Looking for a second.
Second.
Before you vote,
Give
I
it to
would just
Harry.
like to thank everyone for your participation tonight. This is very much what I had hoped we would accomplish. I think we had some very healthy discussion, and I appreciate our panel
Yeah,
of experts.
thank you guys for staying late
Thank
and
you guys very much for
whatnot.
coming in tonight.
It's a tough discussion to have, but
It
it's
is.
one
I
it's
still want to
nice
see the
have.
pipe.
I'll go get it real quick.
Okay.
No,
so-
no,
okay.
don't.
Now you can vote. Thank you.
Don't.
I'm just kidding, Kevin. I mean, I want to see it, but it's not that important.
Oh, hey, I need a vote. I need a vote on adjournment.
Oh.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 We are adjourned.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Is she okay?
Chris, should we concern?
She has a really high fever.